Hi there, good evening to you. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson may have misled the House of Commons at least 4 times. That's according to MPs investigating his conduct over Partygate. The Commons Privileges Committee says breaches of coronavirus rules in Downing Street would have been obvious to Mr Johnson at the time. The former Prime Minister repeatedly denied that rules were broken at Number 10 when asked about it in the Commons. He says it was his belief all guidance had been followed.
The reason there's no evidence to show that I must have known or I must have believed that illegal events were taking place is because I didn't. And I thought we were fighting COVID to the best of our ability in very difficult circumstances in Number 10, in the Cabinet Office, night and day. And I believe that what we were doing was in conformity with the COVID regulation. So that is why I said what I said in Parliament.
Well, Mr Johnson says he would have queried Sue Gray's independence before appointing her to investigate Partygate if he'd known she would join Labour. The senior civil servant, who's been appointed Sir Keir Starmer's new Chief of Staff, found widespread rule-breaking had taken place in government buildings, and Mr Johnson was fined by police as a result. Labour say Boris Johnson's using the appointment to vindicate himself after he was ousted over a series of scandals. Major ambulance strikes in England and Wales have been called off after what the unions have described as a huge shift in the government's position. Tens of thousands of key workers in England had been due to walk out on Monday and Wednesday next week. Well, Unison and GMB have suspended the industrial action following an agreement by ministers to reopen pay talks for both this and next financial year. Strikes in Wales and Scotland have also been paused for talks with the respective governments. Scotland's largest teaching union has recommended its members accept the latest pay offer from the Scottish Government. The EIS has suspended all planned strike action and will ballot its members on the new deal, which would see teachers' pay rise by £5,200 in April and would bring to an end more than 12 months of dispute. Constance Martin and Mark Dolan have been remanded in custody after the remains of a baby were found on Wednesday. The pair were charged with manslaughter, concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice at Crawley Magistrates Court. The remains of the baby, named in court documents as Victoria, were found in a shed in Brighton following a major search. The pair will appear at the Old Bailey at the end of the month. The disgraced American lawyer Alex Murdaugh has been sentenced to life in prison without parole for murdering his wife and son. The jury took less than 3 hours on Thursday before convicting Murdaugh of shooting his wife and son on their family estate in South Carolina in 2021. Prosecutors argued successfully it was an attempt to distract from him stealing millions of dollars from clients to feed his drug habit. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News, but now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
My thanks to Aaron, who returns in an hour's time. This is Mark Dolan tonight. Before 9, we'll be speaking to former UKIP and member of the European Parliament, Godfrey Bloom. We'll be asking whether the civil service has a left-wing bias. Author, columnist and broadcaster Gary Bushell is with me after that. We'll be discussing the BBC getting rid of the huge talent that is Ken Bruce. Is he just too male, pale and stale for the organisation? Reality TV sensation Sandy Bogle, of course, from Gogglebox and Celebrity Big Brother, is joining us later in the hour. Is reality TV making us stupid? Plot spoiler, yes it is. At 9, in my big opinion, these sensational lockdown files prove what we feared all along. The COVID response was about politics, not science. And the powers that be were laughing at us throughout. In the big question, is 18 too young to get married? And in my take at 10, as top bureaucrat Sue Gray joins the Labour Party as their Chief of Staff, does the civil service have a problem with impartiality? So this is Mark Dolan tonight. Put something cold and fizzy in the fridge. After all, it's Friday night. You've just put the kids to bed. Why don't we have some fun and a big debate along the way? Now, as you'll have heard this week, Sue Gray is to be appointed as Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, direct from polishing off a report that brought down a Prime Minister with a huge mandate from the public. Was the Partygate inquiry a stitch-up? The question has to be asked. Does the civil service have an issue with impartiality? Who better to ask than the man himself, former UKIP MEP, Godfrey Bloom. Hi, Godfrey.
Hi, Mark. Good evening to you.
Good to have you on the programme. First of all, what do you make of Sue Gray's defection to the Labour Party?
Well, I think it's probably not quite as simple as all that. You know, this left-wing, right-wing business is really not quite on the mark, in my view. The point is, with civil servants, they are a different species, and I work with them on various matters pertaining to regulation in the City of London, and I've had contact with them. When I started, an old sage essentially, who was also an outsider, he got on civil servants.
Let me just interrupt you, Godfrey, because the sound is pretty wretched. I'd love to hear what you've got to say. So, team, can we please turn Godfrey up? Maybe put 10p in the meter. I really do want to debate this. At 10 o'clock, it's the topic of my take at 10. Sue Gray, who's appointed to look at the Partygate allegations. We're told she's whiter than white, squeaky clean, more balanced than an elephant on a stool at the circus, and yet she now takes over as the Labour Party's Chief of Staff. Surely this plays into the public's worst nightmares about how impartial or not impartial the civil service may actually be. It's got to be a concern. Do you have issues around whether you think the civil service is impartial? By the way, it's not only left-right, as Godfrey points out, but Remain versus Brexiteer. We know that the civil service, known as the Blob, are often characterised as having their foot on the brake when it comes to the potential of Brexit. So whether it's a left-leaning bias, whether it's supporting public sector workers who are constantly on strike, or whether it's stopping Brexit, I wonder whether the good old civil service are to blame. We'll debate that later. We'll try to get the line back to Godfrey Bloom. But now let's talk about Radio 2 star Ken Bruce, who hosted his much-loved BBC Radio 2 show for the final time today, before he heads off to commercial rival Greatest Hits Radio. His show was the most listened to radio programme in Britain, with 8.5 million listeners a week. So why is he gone? Is he too pale, male and stale for the BBC? Let's speak to best-selling author and one of Britain's most fearless and entertaining journalists, Gary Bushell. Gary, great to have you in the studio.
Mark,
got to shake that
good
hand.
to be here.
Lovely to have you on the programme. Look, the BBC were mad to let this guy go. He was on a reported £400,000 a year, which by Radio 2 standards is a modest salary. Zoe Ball, just south of £1 million. So why is he gone?
It's partly what you say. It is partly ageism, and for that reason, I thank you very much for having me, and I'm not someone younger. I mean,
well, you might be pale, but you're not stale.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's part. He's seen. I mean, he's chosen to go. He's seen people being forced out over the last year for that reason, because they're great people. Vanessa Feltz.
Simon Mayo. Oh, you're a bit cheeky there. Poor Vanessa. But yeah, I mean, Simon Mayo left. Steve Wright. Another massive show. What a talent.
Bill Kenwright.
Yeah.
People like that. Fantastic people.
Yeah.
And the strategy is they feel that they can replace these people and attract a different audience, a younger audience. It's all, they're being sacrificed on the altar of this younger audience who probably don't exist, because what younger audiences that are there are not looking for Radio 2, they're looking for their Spotify playlists, you know.
Yes.
It is not what they're after.
But the problem is that the BB's on a hiding to nothing, seeking these young viewers and young listeners, aren't they? Because, I mean, I've got a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, and when I explained to my 17-year-old about the licence fee, he laughed. I couldn't believe.
Why would you play it?
Yeah, exactly right.
Exactly.
And he'd be the first to go to jail to not pay it. But
do you not feel as well, though, that younger people aren't quite like us in terms of, like, people of our age, you're younger than me, but we tend to grow up with our genres. We were in our little eras. We were in our glam rock or with punk or whatever, or 60s, whatever. I find that younger people now are much more open-minded about it. They listen to all sorts of music. My youngest kids listen to Foreigner, who I've never listened to, and
yeah.
you know, and Fleetwood Mac and people like that. They're not really interested in Stormzy per se.
Well, you're so right. My 13-year-old is obsessed with Barry Gibb and the Bee Gees.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's young enough to hit those high notes. Lucky him. But I think the issue is, you mentioned, we talk about Ken Bruce, it's 8.5 million listeners a week. Now, you've been reporting on the media and entertainment showbiz for decades. Just give me a sense of how successful his show actually was, and now he's leaving.
Why would they let him leave? If they had any brains at all.
I mean, no one gets 8.5 million listeners a week.
No. It's incredible that anyone would let that go, but they see their strategy working when it isn't working. You've already seen that. I think commercial radio gets 51% of the audience now, 51% of the listeners. They're losing them. They're not going to win them in this strategy because the people they're replacing these legends with are not of the same stature. You wouldn't trust. I'm not going to name them. You know who I mean.
Name names, Gary. Come on,
but they're not
truth bombs.
I'll come on. But Rob Beckett, fine to his degree, but he's not. He's no replacement for Paul O'Grady, is he?
Well, I'll plead the Fifth Amendment on that one, but let's have a listen to Ken Bruce's sign-off from Radio 2.
I would just like to say thank you particularly to Phil McGarvey and Janine Meyer-Smith. There are the only two in the production team. What a fabulous pair they have been. And to the BBC, I've been here for a long time, and apart from the occasional vagary, it is still the finest broadcasting organisation in the world. I thought about this song to finish, and one that comes to an end, I thought might be the end.
And what a class act, by the way. They don't make them like that anymore, Ken Bruce.
They don't. They really don't. That's why they should be treasured. And you can't just replace them with someone who's a bit well-known on TV. It doesn't work.
Also, can we just talk about this discrepancy? Now, look, I've got no personal issue with Zoe Ball. She's obviously got a good agent. She has fewer listeners than Ken Bruce.
Yes.
But she's on double the money. How does that work?
I guess it's perception. I guess they see her as being a younger face.
Right.
But they're not driving people to the market, to the radio station. So it's a deeply flawed strategy. And I think, there's more chance of seeing a tax cut in the budget than there is of any of this working.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. What's going to happen to the Beeb? Because I've been reading your columns in various newspapers since I was a kid, and that includes Bushel on the Box,
Quite
your
right.
iconic
Yep.
column. That was in The Sun, wasn't it? Bushel on the Box?
It's in The Sun, it's in the Daily Star Sunday now. It's been about...
There you go. Well, that's it. You go to the highest bidder, don't you? But you've obviously written about shows on the Beeb for decades. There have been some great shows.
There have been some great shows.
Like Wildlife at One, the Attenborough stuff, some of the dramas, Only Fools and Horses, The Office. But what's happening to the Beeb now? Where's it going?
Well, I don't think they're in tune with the majority audience anymore, and I don't think they're trying to be too often. You look at a comedy. Comedy over Christmas was a disgrace. Look at radio comedy. BBC radio comedy used to be a real must-listen-to treat.
Yeah.
And now they've got nothing you want to listen to. I don't know, we've gone for this absurd decision now. We get people... I know of people who've done one gig and have gone straight onto television. One gig. I also know of people who've done 30 years of gigs who can't get a camera near them. And it just seems like a perverse attitude to have.
And what about this alleged ageism at the Beeb? Is that unfair, given the fact that the Beeb do have plenty of older stars on their channel? Are we being unfair on the Beeb with the label of ageism?
No, because they're turning their back on those people, and by turning their back on those big old stars, they're also turning their back on significant numbers of their listeners, who will then in turn turn their back on them, because they owed them a duty too. These people have been loyally paying their fee. They've been listening. They see someone like Ken Bruce as a friend. You can't replace that sort of wit and warmth with some fly-by-night celebrity.
No, too right. Let's get your golden balls, your kind of clairvoyant hat on for a moment. What do you think is the long-term future for the Beeb? How long will we have the licence fee, and how long will we have Auntie altogether?
See, this is where you never know, because politicians lie about this all the time. I asked Tony Blair this to his face in 2000, and Blair said to me, the licence fee, that's going soon. And I, like an idiot, I believed him. So I can't tell you, because all the time the governments are conned into keeping a licence fee, they'll carry on as they are. What they need is a complete reboot. Because obviously GBNews exists because the BBC can't be bothered to give us a balanced news agenda. This is why great things like this happen.
Well, I'm so excited because talking of great things, we are joined in the studio by a total legend of Fleet Street, one of Britain's most fearless and entertaining columnists. Gary Bushell. Now, we're going to talk to Gary after the break about what he thinks of Rishi Sunak. Should we bring back Boris? What does he make of Keir Starmer as well? Plus, the lineup for Glastonbury has been announced. We'll cover that with the big man. Lots to get through. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At 9 o'clock, in My Big Opinion, the lockdown files revealed what we thought all along. The government were making it up off the hoof. They were following politics, not the science. We'll get to that at 9 o'clock. But with me in the studio reacting to the big stories of the day is one of Britain's most fearless and entertaining journalists. It's Gary Bushell, who writes, of course, for the Daily Star Sunday, the Sunday Express, the Mirror and the Sunday Mirror. He's got more jobs than I have. Gary, let's talk about Glastonbury. The latest lineup has dropped, and a few golden oldies.
Well, there's always golden oldies, aren't there, at Glastonbury?
Yeah.
And there's some really big bands, Arctic Monkeys and Elton and Guns N' Roses, people like that. You could see the top acts, but there's complaints, I know, that they're all male for a start. And you think, well, OK, what female acts are there around of that status? Because there's Kate Bush, but Kate Bush isn't going to do it. You've got Madonna.
You've got Madonna.
But
You've got Americans.
Yeah, lots of Americans.
Britney. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we got Lizzo, but we haven't got Beyonce. Beyonce did it, I think, in 2011 and was fantastic. But obviously...
We've got Adele, right? That's probably about it in terms of global...
Oh, in terms of the global stars, yeah. Younger ones, yeah. Ed, I suppose, yeah. But, I mean, of that stature, ones who could headline that and make it something special. I think I don't think there's anything sexist about Glastonbury. Could they be very, very careful? They're the sort of people who read The Guardian. They're going to be bending over backwards to have a mixed bill, as much of a mixed bill as they can. But they would have gone to everybody. They would have gone to Taylor Swift, who was supposed to do it in 2020. They would have gone to all of these fantastic people.
Yeah, and they've given the stage to Katy Perry and plenty of others in the past. Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible event. Glastonbury is an event we should be proud of, isn't it? Because it's potentially the greatest music festival in the world, isn't it?
I guess so. Coachella's the other one, but I mean, they're big. They're all massive. Brazil's fantastic but it's something to be proud of. Yeah, it's a great achievement.
What do you think of Elton? Because this will be, I understand, at Glastonbury, his last live gig in the UK on his tour. Have you heard about that? This is the full stop. So he finished his American tour at the Dodger Stadium, and he finishes in the UK in Glastonbury.
I think
Somerset.
that he's been fantastic, of course, and it's a fantastic legacy. He's probably right to stop. His voice isn't what it was, so why push it? He doesn't need to push it. I mean, I've seen him play very intimate shows. I've seen him play big shows, and he is obviously a magnificent pop icon. But it probably is time to stop.
And Guns N' Roses, I don't want to be ageist because that would be hypocritical, but are they a bit old for all that rocking and rolling?
I know rock and roll. What about the Stones, man? I mean, you can't get any older than that.
No, exactly. Let's talk about politics now. Do you rate Rishi Sunak?
Not at all. And I was really disappointed with most of the TV coverage of Rishi's great Windsor debacle because. It came out with more spin than Michael McIntyre's The Wheel, and when you look at it, it had the substance of a VR hologram. It had nothing to it, and all the claims he was making were contradicted on the quiet by the EU. So it still comes down to his promises. He's telling us one thing, and the reality is part of the UK is still going to be subject to the European Court of Justice.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay.
Why is any part of... We voted as a country to leave the EU.
Don't you think there has to be some kind of compromise so we can end this madness and get on with our lives?
I just... personally, I'd have just gone the other way and gone nuclear and just walked away from them. I think that was the problem. You can't really deal with them because they're too clever, they're too shrewd. They certainly outwitted our negotiators, didn't they?
Do you think it was a mistake to get rid of Boris?
I think the Tories are going to lose so dramatically at the next election, they'll be wishing they hadn't. Because obviously, whatever you think about Boris, he was a superbly popular figure. People loved him. He had that, bounce to him, that kangaroo bounce, whatever you want to say.
Yeah,
I mean, but the trouble with me, I like Boris as a person, but like all of these politicians, they say one thing and then they let you down. Because out of nowhere, Boris suddenly imposed this mad green agenda on us, which no one had voted for. Not Rishi. What are Rishi's great... I mean, we had Keir Starmer's rather infantile 5-point memorandum the other day. But what's Rishi's? Rishi's, I think, is to say, I'm going to wreck the economy more by pushing up corporation tax. I'm going to turn a blind eye to illegal immigration. It's all very well for Keir to turn around and say, we want safer streets and better police. Well, we all want that. How are you going to... He didn't say how he was going to cost it. There was no idea how he was going to pay for it. And you think, well, we can all dream. What we need is someone can have action this day on all these things that annoy people, including, may I say, for your kids as well, how are they going to get on the housing market? It's great. We're spending millions of pounds on people who shouldn't be here because they aren't... there were no... asylum seekers from Albania. There's no war going on in Albania. They are just illegal immigrants who've come here as economic migrants, and Rishi is wiping all of that clean. It's madness. They talk tough all the time and don't deliver. And that's what I think now you're going to see a big vote for the Reform UK, a big vote for the Social Democratic Party, because people are looking for alternatives.
Indeed, but is that going to work in our two-party system? Is that not a wasted vote?
The two-party system sometimes comes undone. Don't forget the Liberal Party were massive 100 years ago, and The Great Death of Liberal England was a superb book. Are we seeing the Great Death of Conservative England? I think they might destroyed themselves. I, for one, I mean, would you vote for them now?
It would be hard.
It would be hard.
I mean, I'm like many of my viewers and listeners, I'm politically homeless.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't want Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. But then again, this is a Conservative government that have presided over the woke takeover of our society and our institutions. They've presided over, I believe, a disastrous COVID response, which involved destroying the economy and, in my view, not saving any more lives. And of course, economic damage and all the rest of it.
They never say, why have we got this? Why have we got all this debt? You've caused it.
However, there is one question, which is, would Labour have been any better? And is Keir Starmer really the answer?
No and no. But I think he'll be the next Prime Minister. I don't think Labour will be any better. I mean, because it's just that in reality, there's a paper-thin difference between what they'd be like in power. I just think the Labour Party, a Labour government wouldn't even try to adopt these poses. At least, when you look at Starmer, what does he actually believe in? Because we know he stood there with Corbyn at the height of the anti-Semitism. I know he's done something now, but he didn't say anything then. And what's his vision? Blair had a vision, like it or not. Mrs Thatcher had a vision. What have they got? Platitudes. It's just, honestly, no substance whatsoever.
And what do you make of so-called wokeness or political correctness? This idea of gender ideology, which means that a man is now a woman and we ignore biological sex. Critical race theory, which basically implies that if you're white, you are racist. And all of the other woke stuff. What's your view of that?
We see that. I'm not bigoted in any way. If people want to change sex, that's up to them. Hate racism, etc. That's a given before we say anything else. But this is just a degree of madness that we're tilting into when people are starting to say what you say is the truth and what the truth is has to be ignored. And it's probably the same across the board on lots of other issues. You can't just say something and have it happen.
And how you feel.
And how you... Oh, yeah. I mean, it is... I think it's possibly to do with social media, possibly to do with the furloughing and the anxiety of the last few years, but it seems to be reaching a crescendo now of craziness. And someone's got to have the balls to say, no, we're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to say that children have to have transgender toilets and nonsense like this.
Yeah, or maybe toddlers going to performances of erotic drag artists.
There you go. I mean, I don't mind. Lily Savage was wonderful, but there just seems to be a rash of everywhere you look as a drag artist now, and I just wonder why.
And what about your industry, the papers? How are things in the world of Fleet Street? It's changed a lot in your time.
Well, it's a losing battle, perhaps, but I think there's a lot of good papers out there, a lot of good journalists out there, and there are still papers worth buying, and largely for the columnists.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially, and not in any way to the least extent yours. What do you make of the Telegraph dropping these WhatsApp messages from Matt Hancock? It's an ethical dilemma, isn't it? Isabel Oakeshott has made a commitment. She's made a promise to Matt Hancock, a non-disclosure agreement. I'll take delivery of these messages and they will stay with me and me alone. She's reneged on that now. She's revealed her sources. What do you think?
Yeah. I never trust a journalist. It's one of the maxims they should have. I mean, Matt, I think, was a bit naive not to have her sign some sort of non-disclosure agreement if he's going to share all this very potentially damaging stuff. No, it's not potentially damaging, it is damaging.
Yeah, so he made the mistake of handing it over in the first place.
Yes.
I mean, in a way, it's a dilemma for her, because some journalists have said it's the wrong thing to do, because what's happened is that Matt Hancock and those other politicians have lost their freedom of speech. Why isn't a private message private?
He's shared it with her to write a book. By doing that, he made it unprivate. Right. He made it not private.
Yeah.
So I think the fault lays with him.
If you were in Isabel's position, would you have done the same?
It's a great story, isn't it? I mean, it's a public interest story.
Yeah.
Surely you can make that case, because we're finding out things about the lockdown that they've been suppressed before. So you're talking about it. We're talking about it. The papers are talking about it. It's shedding light on what goes on behind closed doors. And so that's always a good thing.
Brilliant stuff. Take me through all your papers. The Daily Star Sunday.
Bush on the Box continues, and I think it's now been going for, this has been the 33rd year. It's the longest column in Fleet Street.
Just brilliant. Longest and best, Gary. Great.
Thank you very much.
Come back and see us again soon. Gary Bushell there. Always worth reading, and as we've found out, worth listening to as well. Now, in my big opinion, we're going to be debating those WhatsApp messages. Was it the right thing to do to reveal them to the public? Was the Telegraph right to drop them so publicly? I think they've done the right thing because it reveals the truth, which is that the government knew what they were doing all along. Everything that we feared came to light. It was politics, not science. It was covering your backside, not saving lives. We'll get to that in my big opinion. Also, after 10, in my take at 10, I'll be dealing with Sue Gray, who was a top civil servant. She was behind the Partygate investigation. Well, it turns out she's not that politically neutral after all. She's now Chief of Staff for the Labour Party. So, do the civil service have a problem with impartiality? Are they suffering a left-wing political bias? We'll discuss all of that, plus my all-star panel. And my Mark Meets guest is the woman that was a high flyer in the world of Levi's jeans, one of the top jobs in America. And the woke mob got a hold of her. They took away her job, but they gave her her voice. She tells her amazing story after 10. Lots to come. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's time now for the GB News Clips of the Week. 7 days of highs and lows on the People's Channel. And we start with Michelle Dewberry, who is tough on politicians and even tougher on her regular panellists, including enforcing strict rules on studio hospitality. Take a listen.
We don't encourage irresponsible drinking on Tubes and Co. I think once a week is in with, you know, the guidelines of responsible drinking.
Okay.
If I was to do it 5 nights a week, that might be stretching it a little bit too far.
But you never ask us on Fridays.
Yes, but that's because I like interesting, upbeat, fun people on a Friday. I keep my
see.
serious people
I see.
on the Monday.
That'll teach me.
Yes,
Right.
there you go.
That's that in our box.
Yes.
Sobering words there for Michelle's alcohol-free panel. Staying on alcohol, and our formidable Southwest reporter Jeff Moody clearly didn't get Michelle's memo that it's no booze during the week. Here's Patrick Christie's speaking to him after a day in the pub.
I have, you know. I've been here since 10 o'clock this morning. I've been sampling this amazing Ukrainian beer. I'm about to have my second pint, third pint.
Second pint, third pint, 10th pint, recollections may vary. Now, I'm a big fan of Esther and Phil on Friday and Saturday mornings, and the brilliant Esther McVeigh knows a good story when she sees one. But on this occasion, you have to ask yourself whether we really needed the guest at all. Queen of the plot spoilers, Esther, take it away.
Claims he has been able to save a staggering £35,000 by undertaking a DIY extension project to his house by using YouTube and social media. Joining us now is Scott Bagley to tell us this story. Fantastic. As I understood it, you wanted to do an extension. You asked builders to give you a quote. They said 45k, and you must have thought, well, I can do it better than that. Carry on the story from there. How did you do it?
Carry on the story from there. I think we've already heard it. What's next? The Titanic hits an iceberg in the Atlantic Ocean and sinks?
Carry on the story from there.
In the Agatha Christie whodunit, it was the butler all along.
Carry on the story from there.
And last but not least, Snow White and the Handsome Prince live happily ever after, Esther.
Carry on the story from there.
The brilliant Esther and Phil will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Always a brilliant watch and a brilliant listen. Now, on my show last week, I was lucky enough to get an interview with Lady Victoria Hervey. And it turns out myself and her ex-boyfriend, Prince Andrew, are not the only ones who are very big fans of this royal insider. Meet special in the company of socialite, aristocrat, reality star, entrepreneur and model, and it girl, no less. Yeah. By the way, I'm an it boy. So, and if you believe that, you'll believe anything. It's Lady Victoria Hervey.
Hello.
Alistair's kept the camera on you even when I'm talking, and I don't blame him. He's a man of taste. Director Alistair. That's right, director Alistair, now sadly single after his girlfriend watched last week's show. He's always trying to appear in clips of the week because he's so desperate for us to show that old photo from happier times when he used to work as a model. I can categorically assure you that we will never waste your time showing that photo again. Well, I guess we know who's directing the show tonight, Alistair. Moving swiftly on, my marvellous colleagues Mark Longhurst and soon-to-be deputy political editor Tom Harwood were distracted by a background message as Tom reported from Parliament. Take a look at the placard behind Tom in Westminster.
Boris Johnson isn't a massive fan of the agreement. He's saying that it could, in certain ways, act as a drag on UK regulatory divergence from the European Union.
The sign read, Jesus Christ will return soon. Why not? Anything is possible. However, the man waving that placard was later carried off to a secure mental unit after holding another sign which said the Tories will win the next election. Tragic. Now, let's talk about this one. It's Jubes & Co again, and Michelle seems to be distracting her viewers.
She says, Michelle, I love your show, but please can you stop showing your lacy underwear? It's distracting my husband from cooking dinner.
Well, I'm wearing the same underwear, and let me tell you, it fits very well. Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg has joined GB News, and he has made a fantastic start. Everyone's loving the show. We all wondered what would be in the programme. Politics, culture, maybe something we could never imagine.
This is the People's Channel, so for our nightly edition of Vox Populi Vox Day, we asked you.
Vox populi, vox dei. Sounds naughty, Jacob. Is that Latin for something rude? Nicely done. We will finish on Patrick Christie's. Not literally, don't panic. Patrick has a unique bond with the regulars on his show, but I didn't realise he was this close to former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib.
He's going to go on the hard sell, isn't he? I'm going to enter Ben Habib.
Run that by me again, Patrick.
Enter Ben Habib.
Patrick, I think you should check with Ben first, maybe get to know each other better, a candlelit dinner perhaps, a couple of glasses of wine. But if it does work out, I do hope I'll be getting an invite to the wedding. And those are your clips of the week. Well, there you go. Lots to get through. We're going to be joined shortly by Sandy Bogle from Gogglebox to answer a simple question. Is reality TV making Britain stupid? And don't forget, after 9, in my big opinion, I'll be dealing with the WhatsApp messages from Matt Hancock, proving what we thought all along. They were following politics, not the science. See you in 2.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. After 9 o'clock, in my big opinion, I'll be talking about those WhatsApp messages, and we'll get reaction to tomorrow's big stories with my all-star panel. But now, has reality TV made us stupid? We are going to be delighted to welcome a big star of reality TV herself, from Gogglebox to Big Brother and everything in between, Sandy Bogle. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, hello.
Sandy, great to have you on the show. Can you take me through the various reality shows you've done? You've done Gogglebox, which is basically a TV show in which people are filmed watching telly. Celebrity Big Brother? What else have you done?
Celebrity Big Brother, Famous and Fighting Crime, 100% Hotter, Celebs on the Farm, Eggheads. I mean, I could go on.
Okay. Why
Cruise Control, the Lorraine Show.
Right. What makes you do these shows, Sandy?
Because it's reality, it's real life, and I love reality because I can be myself. I don't have to put on no airs and graces. What you see is what you get. And that's how it's supposed to be. That's what reality TV is supposed to be like. You being you, not faking it or being anybody else. That is reality.
Sandy, is there good money in it?
It depends. Like, I mean, there's always this controversy of how far you are on the ladder, how far up and down or whatever thing. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you just be yourself and you connect with people, then you can make as much money as you can. You know, you just got to be you.
You're famous now. How do you handle that, Sandy?
Being me, being real, being me. No airs and graces. If I did change, my family would actually say, "What are you doing? This is not you." So what you see is what you get. You can ask anybody. It's me. Like,
however, does it bother you getting stopped in the street, or you go into Tesco and you're trying to do the weekly shop and you get pestered for selfies and all the rest of it?
Yes, I do actually. You don't really get to be able to finish shopping, but I mean, it's just the smiles on everybody's faces, and you know, when people are like, they run up to you or they tap you. Or the other day, actually, it was yesterday. Actually, somebody actually said that it was my voice. I was talking to my brother, and they just said to me it was my voice that they recognised, and then my nails, and then my hair. But it's my voice actually, and my laugh, my giggle.
I do think that shows like Gogglebox are very entertaining. It was a surprise hit, wasn't it, Gogglebox? And credit to Channel 4 for rolling the dice creatively like that. Who knew that the British public would want to watch themselves watching telly?
The concept worked. It was amazing. The concept, whoever thought it, because even when we was approached, it was like we didn't understand it. People watching TV, watching TV. You know, it didn't actually calculate straight away. But yeah, concept is it worked amazing, and it's still going. So you know, they must be doing something correct.
How does it work? How many hours do they film you for?
Oh gosh, it can be long, it could be short. You can't really put any hours onto it because anything could happen, because reality is what it is. So if anything happens straight away, then obviously you have to be able to film it, and people will see the reaction. So you know, it changes up and down. You know, as I said, you know, it could be any amount of time.
I do think Gogglebox is one of the more innovative and smart formats. But do you think that reality TV, especially shows like Love Island and Big Brother, are making us more stupid?
Well, I mean, as I said, I'll keep it 100. When reality first started years ago, I believe that was real, true reality.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I'm talking about like Big Brother back in the days, X Factor, obviously Gogglebox, but they were real. That was real. Now, contrived, could I say? I mean, I don't deal with scripts. It's people being told what to do and people told what to say. It's not the same as it used to be, as far as I'm concerned. I only deal with reality TV shows, not shows that people have to be told and shown what to do and what to say. That's not reality to me. That's my opinion. I'm going to say it as people know me. I keep it 100. I keep it real. That's not reality for me. It's planted. It's contrived. Contrived and reality are two different things. You know, Gogglebox, it's reality. It is what you see is what you get. So, people may not believe me or not want to agree with me, but that's their opinion. We're all allowed to have an opinion. And my opinion is some are contrived and some ain't.
Sandy,
but reality is reality.
I
Keep
wouldn't
it
dare
100.
disagree with you. I'm not that brave. Lovely to have you on the programme, and we'll catch up soon.
You asked me. Anybody, look, you know me, and anybody would ask me. Sandy will just keep it real. I'm saying what I believe is happening now.
Listen, what a treat. You've put a smile on all our faces. Sandy Bogle, star of Gogglebox, Celebrity Big Brother, and much more. We'll catch up soon. Now, listen, we spoke earlier to Godfrey Bloom, former UKIP MEP, of course, and we lost the line, unfortunately. Don't worry, he hasn't been censored or cancelled. I believe that Godfrey joins us now. We've put £1 in the meter. Sorry we lost you earlier, Godfrey. Can we move the conversation on to the politically homeless, because you've been equally excoriating about the Conservative and the Labour Party, and you're even pretty sniffy about Reform UK. Will there ever be a home for the politically homeless?
It doesn't seem in the immediate future that that's going to be the case. And of course, the original question was, does the civil service have a left-wing bias? And I would argue that politicians right across the board have a left-wing bias. We now have a relatively neo-socialist government, which isn't conservative at all, and the opposition is pure socialist. So it's a bit like curry. You can have a prawn curry or a lamb curry, but it's still curry, and people want egg and chips, and that's the long and short of it, I'm afraid. No, I don't think we're ever going to go back to a parliament who actually reflects the will of ordinary people. And that's really been shown by Brexit. We voted massively for Brexit, and we haven't got it, have we? We haven't got it. And it seems to me that things now are passing by Parliament. The World Health Organization now is going to make our decisions in the future for our health treatments. The IMF, the WEF, all these people. Parliament really doesn't have much to do with the way we're governed anymore, does it?
It would seem not. Do you think the problem is our electoral system? Is it first past the post? Would PR help? Proportional representation? Could that allow a smaller party to rise up the ranks and ultimately prevail?
Well, it certainly worked for UKIP. And the word I got on the street when we were having a referendum for UKIP, and UKIP was doing it under proportional representation, was so many people said to me that they haven't voted for years because it was a waste of time. Voting red or voting blue is really a waste of time. And then they said, I'm going to vote on this because my vote will actually count. They're going to count it. And they did count it. And of course, Brexit was voted through. But the House of Lords, the House of Commons and the civil service have stalled it, didn't want it. And it was negotiated by Theresa May and the civil service, who did their best to sabotage it. And it's still sabotaged. Yes, proportional representation, but I would go further than that, Mark. I wouldn't allow any political parties at all. As I said on your programme before, I believe you should stand at the hustings on an election and say, my name is Fred Bloggs and I believe in this. No rosettes, no reds, no blues, no greens. This is me, this is what I stand for, and people in your constituency for vote. I would get elected to Parliament probably on that basis, and so would many others who stand up for the ordinary working man.
Well, I think that's an interesting point. I've always thought party membership is a bad idea. Party membership is a strange idea because I would never want to be allied to one political grouping because my opinion changes, you know, intermittently and it's organic and you learn about life and your views change. Can I ask you about UKIP? Do you think they are still a force in politics?
No, I don't think so, because, you know, they had their chance, basically, and they blew it. They did a wonderful job in getting the referendum and helping to win the referendum. All that was marvellous and some wonderful patriotic people. But what we need now is to step into a new dimension. We don't want a one-trick pony. We could have, what we really want is an old-fashioned Conservative Party as the Lord Salisbury saw it, the most successful Conservative administration ever, and that is very low regulation, very low taxation, and let's get rid of the 6 million civil servants, whether they're left-wing or not. 6 million. Let's have a good look at the 6 million people who seem to be on the dole when people are crying out for workers. Let's have a look at that and get back to the sort of country that we should have, which is low regulation. And that is the way forward for any economy, not just Britain, any economy. Low tax and low regulation. So we can expand the economy.
Godfrey, I'm glad we caught up in the end. Worth the wait. Godfrey Bloom, former UKIP MEP, political commentator and dropper of truth bombs. At 9 o'clock, in my big opinion, the sensational lockdown files prove what we feared. The COVID response was about politics, not science. And the powers that be were laughing at us throughout. In the big question, is 18 too young to get married? In my take at 10, as top bureaucrat Sue Gray joins the Labour Party as their chief of staff, is it proof that our civil service is not impartial? Lots to get through. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's coming up to 9 o'clock on Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, the sensational lockdown files prove what we feared. The COVID response was about politics, not science, and the powers that be were laughing at us throughout. My Mark Meets guest is the woman who was destined to become the boss of fashion giant Levi's before she gave it all up to take on the woke mob. Hear Jennifer Say's incredible story after 10. In the big question, after the legal age of marriage rises to 18, we'll ask, is that still too young to get married? What is the right age in which to tie the knot? Plus, in my take at 10 on the Sue Gray story, hired, of course, by Labour, I'll be reacting to that. We've got the papers at 10:30 sharp as well. Lots to get through, including that big opinion monologue. And by the way, I've got the Sue Gray report. I'll be reacting to that as well. First, the headlines, and whilst that's happening, I'll be reading WhatsApp messages from Matt Hancock.
Hi there, I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson may have misled the House of Commons at least 4 times, according to MPs, investigating his conduct over Partygate. The Commons Privileges Committee says breaches of coronavirus rules in Downing Street would have been obvious to Johnson at the time. The former Prime Minister repeatedly denies that rules were broken at number 10 when asked about it in the Commons. Mr Johnson says it was his belief all guidance had been followed.
The reason there's no evidence to show that I must have known or I must have believed that illegal events were taking place is because I didn't. And I thought we were fighting COVID to the best of our ability in very difficult circumstances in number 10, in the Cabinet Office, night and day. And I believe that what we were doing was in conformity with the COVID regulation. So that is why I said what I said in Parliament.
Well, Boris Johnson also says he would have queried Sue Gray's independence before appointing her to investigate Partygate if he'd known she'd join Labour. The senior civil servant who's been appointed Sir Keir Starmer's new Chief of Staff found widespread rule-breaking had taken place in government buildings. Mr Johnson was fined by police as a result. Well, Labour say Boris Johnson is using the appointment to vindicate himself after he was ousted over a series of scandals. Major ambulance strikes in England and Wales have been called off after what's been described as a huge shift in the government's position over pay. The staff were to walk out on Monday and Wednesday next week. Well, Unison and GMB say they've been assured there's additional money for pay rises outside of the current budget. However, 3,000 members of Unite, the smallest ambulance union, will walk out on Monday after rejecting the offer of pay talks. Teachers in Scotland, meanwhile, are set to suspend their planned strikes after an improved offer, which amounts to a pay rise of 14.6% over 28 months. Unions will now consult their members, but they have recommended their members accept what the Scottish Government's called the largest pay package in over 20 years. The disgraced American lawyer Alex Murdaugh has been sentenced to life in prison without parole for murdering his wife and son. The jury took less than 3 hours on Thursday before convicting Murdaugh of shooting his wife and son on their family estate in South Carolina in 2021. Prosecutors argued successfully it was an attempt to distract him from stealing millions of dollars from clients to feed his drug habit. And the US President Joe Biden's been given a clean bill of health after having surgery to remove cancer cells last month. The White House has confirmed a lesion removed from his chest was a common form of skin cancer and no further treatment will be required. Mr Biden is expected to launch a bid for re-election in the coming weeks. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan.
Thanks, Aaron. We'll see you at 10. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, the sensational lockdown files prove what we feared. The COVID response was about politics, not science, and the powers that be were laughing at us throughout. In my take at 10, as top bureaucrat Sue Gray joins the Labour Party as their Chief of Staff, proof if you needed it that our civil service is far from impartial. My Mark Meets guest is the woman who was destined to become the boss of fashion giant Levi's, one of the biggest jobs in fashion, before she gave it all up to take on the woke mob. Hear Jennifer Say's incredible story after 10. In the big question, after the legal age of marriage rises to 18, we'll be asking, is that still too young to get married? What is the right age to get married? We're still waiting for Mike Parry to get married. I wouldn't hold my breath. We got Saturday's papers as well at 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction. And in the news agenda, I'll be speaking to former head of Royal Protection, Di Davies, on whether woke policing is making us less safe. Reacting to tonight's big stories are my fantastic panel of the aforementioned Bachelor. Very eligible, let me tell you. Journalist and broadcaster Mike Porky Parry. Put a ring on it, Mike. Brilliant political and social commentator Lizzie Zeta. And the face of sport and politics on GB News, broadcaster and writer Aidan McGee. Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show, Mark at gbnews.uk. This show has a golden rule. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Do stick around for my take at 10 when I'll be dealing with Sue Gray's report. You know where you can stick it. Lots to get through. Big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. What's up with government by WhatsApp? Well, because the stunning lockdown files of released messages from the then Health Secretary Matt Hancock demonstrates what we feared all along, that this government was trapped in a terrifying and undemocratic groupthink in which headlines, being seen to act and avoiding battles with political rivals is what shaped the pandemic response. COVID measures, masks, lockdowns, school closures, those pathetic plastic screens in shops and arrows in supermarkets, which I consider nothing more than COVID theatre, were nothing to do with public health and everything to do with politics. Masks are the perfect example. They covered our faces to protect their arses. I'm talking about the politicians. No overwhelming, compelling evidence that these environmentally damaging and socially harmful devices, which are now rotting in landfill and clogging up our oceans, would make a blind bit of difference to stop the spread. In full let's be seen to do something mode, the outgoing Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon chose to mask kids in schools, some as young as 11, sat in the classroom all day long, their faces covered. According to these messages on WhatsApp, the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson's response was that we'd better mask kids in England too, in order to avoid a battle with Sturgeon. Did they even think for a moment, for a second, what impact this might have on kids, on their mental health, their physical and well-being, of course, and their education? As well as comparing countries that had mask mandates and those that didn't, the most recent Cochrane review, the most authoritative study to date, suggests that during the pandemic, masks did nothing. But without compelling data backing them up, all of these measures rolled on courtesy of our WhatsApp government. The messages pinged back and forth, no doubt fuelled on occasion by taxpayer-funded red wine. This vain and shallow soap opera was played out as our lives, our economy and our society were egregiously damaged. It's heroic journalism from the Telegraph newspaper and sheer courage from their reporter Isabel Oakeshott, who has brought opprobrium on herself for breaking her silence and sharing these messages. Astonishingly, rather than receiving praise from fellow journalists, she was harangued this week by the likes of the Today programme on the BBC. There's a surprise, as they grilled her about sharing these messages.
My responsibilities, having finished that book with him, are now to the public interest.
Did you break an NDA?
I mean, that's a matter of public record.
And did the Telegraph pay you
far more
for the
important. The public interest is far more important.
Did the Telegraph pay you for the messages?
I'm a working journalist.
So they did pay you for the messages?
I'm a working journalist. They did not pay me for the messages.
So why are these establishment media figures so critical of Oakeshott's decision to share all of these messages? Could it be because they don't want the public to know the truth? You tell me. Given the fact, of course, that it was establishment media like the Beeb, Sky and ITV and others who peddled the narrative that we had to lock down to save lives, and given the fact that they piled pressure on politicians to roll out these measures, perhaps they don't want to look back at what actually happened. And it was these establishment media figures, many big stars on TV and radio, who belittled, attacked and gaslit figures from the world of science, politics and ordinary members of the public, who looked at the pandemic response, masking people, closing schools and shutting the economy down on and off for 2.5 years, and said it was madness. We were all granny killers, and right-wing apparently. How does that work? Well, here we are with a wrecked economy, a national debt of over £2 trillion, with £500 billion having been borrowed to pay healthy people to stay at home and improve their banana bread recipe. Beyond that, we also have diminished kids and a sadder, angrier, poorer, sicker and more divided society. Don't forget, part of these COVID measures, which in my view were about making headlines, saw the NHS effectively going on strike, focusing on the elimination of one virus at the expense of everything else. The legacy? A waiting list of over 7 million people. But it's about your health. And these WhatsApp messages demonstrate the cavalier and unaccountable manner in which our public figures, drunk on power, rolled the dice in such a dangerous way. On one occasion, a top advisor joked with Matt Hancock about locking up visitors to the UK in hotel quarantine. Lol. Be clear, all of these measures were a gamble. They were a punt. The danger was oversold, the public were treated like children, and the reaction was truly catastrophic. I've been worried about this potential stitch-up of a public inquiry, which may fall into the intellectual trap of asking why we didn't lock down faster and harder. Luckily, with the release of these WhatsApp messages, this inquiry will be forced to take into account the non-evidence-based approach that underpinned all of these measures. I believe that history will show that we had too many of these measures, not too few, leaving the rest of us to pick up the pieces from this disastrous failed experiment, inspired, don't forget, by the Communist Party of China. The lockdown files reveal our worst fears. None of it was science, it was all politics. And whether it was parties at Number 10 or hilarious banter on WhatsApp, they were laughing at us all along. Lockdowns were a cock-up, and now we have it in black and white. The message from these messages is very clear. We made a terrible mistake. Never again. What do you think? Now, the government will argue that without the COVID measures, lockdowns, face coverings and other interventions, many lives would have been lost. And they would argue that these measures, including masking, were carried out by countries across the world and that ensuring the NHS didn't become overwhelmed was their priority, something they would argue these measures achieved. That's not my view, but what's yours? This is Mark Dolan tonight, the home of free speech. Mark at gbnews.uk. Get those emails in reacting to my big opinion are broadcaster and journalist Mike Parry, political and social commentator Lizzie Zeta, sports writer and broadcaster Aidan McGee. Lizzie, let's start with you. Great to have you back on the show. These lockdown files prove what we thought all along. It was political, not scientific. It was about saving their backsides, not our health.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But I also think there was a certain element that nobody knew what was going on, Mark. Nobody knew. They did it in Italy. They did it all over the world. They locked down because they didn't have a better plan. Now, at the time, I was speaking to people who were involved in AI, artificial intelligence, and they were saying to me, look, we should not be locking down, we should be doing X, Y and Z, but the government are not taking any notice of us. Now, who would want to govern the UK or anywhere at that point? Because it was so difficult. On the other hand, I do think, I mean, some of these text messages are just disgusting, frankly. And the decision not to test people as they were going into care homes is just appalling, absolutely appalling.
Indeed. I mean, Mike Parry, my concern is that it illustrates what we feared all along, that this was not evidence-based. You know, this was not a sort of a weight of data that backed these measures. It strikes me from the tone of these messages, Mike, it was a punt.
Well, look, Lizzie's just made the point that nobody knew what was happening at the start. Now, I was a big supporter of the first lockdown, OK? I thought it sounds very serious. China, we're almost certain now, had lied about the origin of this terrible pandemic, where it was coming from, where it was going to go to. So we were paralysed with fear. So I agreed with the first lockdown. After that, I wanted an evaluation of what it's all about. And when Sweden decided not to follow the herd instinct that Lizzie was talking about, Italy and all that kind of stuff, OK, and to stand on their own 2 feet and independently assess how their society would respond to lockdown, we should also have had the courage and the ability and the foresight to look into ourselves. I think it took about 40 years after the Second World War to pay off the debt of what happened in those days. This is going to take just as long because we've paralysed the country financially. We are in such terrible debt that the only thing that politicians can think about to get us out of it is either to tax us all to death or to borrow more. Why aren't we getting more messages through that it should have been the start of a new drive to reinvest in the country, to try and get growth in the economy? That's the way we've got to face it now. Otherwise, we're doomed for the next 4 decades.
Aidan McGee, the government will argue they were following scientific advice. The Chief Medical Officer, you've got Chris Whitty, you've got Patrick Vallance. In the end, it was really SAGE that were dictating these policies, and all they were trying to do is save lives.
Yeah, possibly, but I think the one thing the WhatsApp messages have revealed in the last few days is that wasn't the case. It was about politics. It was about saving the government. They had a 90-seat or 80-seat majority. They should have been confident in their own skin in doing the right thing. Now, but to be honest, yes, I did sympathise at the time. I didn't know myself which way things were going to go. It didn't feel natural locking down. But reading the messages in the last couple of days, I mean, it's almost like an episode of The Apprentice. It's half a dozen protagonists sitting around a table bluffing their way through something they just don't understand. And the upshot of that is that, as Mike said, we're going to be feeling this for decades upon decades along. I don't believe Labour would have acted any differently. I don't believe the Lib Dems would have done. I don't believe Labour or even the Lib Dems, if they got in as part of a coalition, would take the narrative any different in any other different direction in years to come either. But yeah, I mean, the message is, once again, Matt Hancock comes out of it absolutely terribly. I don't think anyone had a worse pandemic than that bloke. I interviewed him 6 years ago about cricket, and he bluffed his way through that interview, and I wasn't good enough to get him on the road. And I thought, you know what, this guy's going to have a big career in politics, because he got out of the school we were interviewing him at as quickly as possible, and I thought he's going to go far.
Labour, I think, would have made it last longer. And isn't the other thing, which we all know now, how on earth do you run government through WhatsApp messages? When did they ever sit round a table and say, now, let's get some constructive advice, let's get some...
They couldn't sit around a table.
Sorry?
They couldn't sit around the table.
No, they couldn't sit around the table. They were all WhatsApping each other, you know, sending...
They were drinking wine in the garden.
No, they were sending messages to each other saying, aren't the teachers a bunch of arses and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that's not really the way to run a country, is it? It was appalling political control of something that was out of control but should have been brought back under control, except nobody was in charge.
It was cavalier, it was reckless, it was a mistake. We're going to return to this conversation at 10:30 with the papers, because this story is all over the papers. I know that Lizzie Zita is itching to contribute to that, so we will return with the papers at 10:30. But later this hour, in the news agenda with my panel and former head of Royal Protection, Di Davies, is woke policing making us less safe? That's the view of Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary. But next, in the big question, is 18 too young to get married? See you in 3.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In response to your big opinion, says Richard, all this shows to me is a terrible them and us attitude of the ruling classes, a despicable arrogance and utter disdain for the public. These messages expose an entitled, boozy, out-of-touch regime that runs deep in the presidential style, a bloated machine that is number 10. The mask has finally slipped and now the party is over. Very elegantly put. A flood of emails coming in left, right and centre. How about this from Mahmood? Mark, you can rant and rave as much as you like about how the government should have handled COVID-19. No one really had any full proof knowledge as to how to deal with it. From the government to the road sweeper, the government did what it could with the knowledge provided to them. It's history. It's time to move on. Mahmood, thank you for that. Keep those emails coming, Mark at gbnews.uk. It's time for this. It's time for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day. A new law came into force this week, which increased the legal age of marriage to 18 in England and Wales. Previously, people could get married at 16 or 17 if they had parental consent. The government said the changes would help protect vulnerable children from being forced into marriage. Well, all of this begs a wider question. Are young people getting married too hastily altogether? Is even 18 too young to tie the knot? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome writer at Conservative Home, student campaigner and all-round good egg, Chloe Dobbs. Chloe, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well. Great to have you back in the studio. Do you think 18 is too young to tie the knot?
I think that it is too young to tie the knot, but I don't think that the state should decide that it's too young to tie the knot. I think that it was right for them to put in the legislation to move it to 18, but they shouldn't move it any higher.
Why is 18 too young?
So I think, especially from my experience, I'm 22, and even just in the past couple of years, I've changed massively as a person. Your 20s are the years where you really change, not just your personality, but in dating, you change what your standards are, what your needs are. And to me, the people that I fancied at 18, if I was with them now, I'd be miserable. Right. I don't think you're in a great place to make a good decision at that age.
Yeah. And actually, I suppose the other issue with even 18-year-olds getting married is that you're still impressionable, and an 18-year-old could be bullied and cajoled into getting married, marrying someone they don't want to. So there could still be an element of forced marriage if you weren't careful. Good luck forcing the marriage on someone that's at 40 or 50, right?
Exactly. You have a much better backbone. I definitely was far more impressionable when I was 18 years old. It was only a few years ago. And it is awful if you're in a situation that is very difficult to get out of, especially if you're 18, you probably are not very rich, you probably don't have much money to get the legal help that you need to have a divorce, if that's what you need.
Families, I think, are advantageous to society. They create social cohesion. It's good for the economy. It's good for crime. I think most data proves that. What should the government messaging be about when the best time to get married is? Is there a perfect age?
I wouldn't say there's a perfect age. I personally don't think I would get married until 30. I think people are very different people at 30 compared to 20. But I understand that there are people who want to start a family younger, and that is fine. But if you want to have a strong family and children that are cared for well, you want to be with the right person who's going to care for your child and yourself well. The child's not going to be in a good environment if you choose the wrong person. There's no need to rush. And if you're with someone at 18 who you think is amazing and they are the right person for you, they will still be with you at 25, 30.
I didn't want to wait till I was 30 because I was worried I'd lose my looks. I think that's something that weighs on my shoulders and always will. Let's get the views of Dr. Arthur Cassidy, presenter and social media and celebrity psychologist. Dr. Cassidy, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight.
Hi, Mark. How are you doing?
What do you think about 18? Is it too young to get married?
Of course it is, yes. We know from evidence-based research in developmental psychology that at that age that you're just moving out of identity exploration of who you are and who you might want to be. And so it's crossing that barrier from childhood and puberty through to early adolescence and into late adolescence into early adulthood. So the person at 18 and 19 years of age, even 20 years of age, wouldn't have the necessary range of self-perception and competences to understand the emotional regulation. Emotional regulation, Mark, is a vitally important ingredient in a commitment to a long-term marriage for many, many years. And so that doesn't come till around the age of 25, 26 years of age. So it takes the brain of any young person, up to the age of 25 to accommodate the range of emotional regulation and competences to deal with stress and to deal with who they are in the big world of work and employment. And so I would advocate basically that this is far too young. It should be 21 to give people the breathing space and the security, because they're still very much codependent on parents and guardians at that age. And so they need to be felt that they are secure within themselves. They're secure in their identity. And that will only come as we move through from puberty right through the age of 14, 15, through to 19, 20, where they're then beginning to negotiate that massive changeover into university life and academia, where those are the priorities: getting a good job, getting security. They don't have the finance to set up and get married. They can't cope with those skills. I deal with these young people all the time. And I say breakdown after breakdown after breakdown in 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. The competence levels are not there, Mark.
Well, Arthur, you're sounding very sensible. I mean, first of all, what about love? What about romance? What about love at first sight? And also, if you look at the 50s and 60s in particular, was society not quite well served by people getting married at 18? They'd had all of their kids by the time they were in their mid-20s.
Indeed, they did, yes. That was a model, with the Beatlemania and all of that. That's what it was about. It was very much more biological rather than psychological. So it was love at first sight, and it still is love at first sight. And I don't mention any names, but look, many people today believe she is beautiful, or he is beautiful. It is instant attraction, and there is that whole sexual attraction. That's what dominates our media nowadays. It's not about the emotional aspect of a commitment in a loving relationship. Many it is, but we know from research, Mark, that going back to what we had then in the 60s and 70s, it was, as you have so rightly said, and still is, it's about that interpersonal attraction, the whole science of love, the science, it's all driven by biology of the brain. Today, it's more complicated. We live in a more complex world than we did in the 60s and 70s with social media. And so social media has a lot to contribute in a very negative way. that impacts the brain development of many young people and can destroy many very, very good relationships.
Well, there you go. Let's bring Chloe back into the conversation. And Chloe Dobbs, what do you think about Dr. Cassidy's suggestion that actually marriage should have a minimum age of 21?
I think that is more reasonable than moving it up to 25, 30, which is when I think is probably a better time to get married.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, if you wait till 30, you'll never bother, because then you'll have tasted freedom.
Well, maybe. But I think that the best way to go about this is to win the argument, to explain to people that 18 is too young, not for the state to put in a law. That is not going to win the minds of people. Else people are still going to make bad decisions at 21 who aren't ready yet. We need to tell people to wait until they are ready emotionally and they've figured themselves out to know who is best for them before they decide to marry. That's the best way to go about it.
And Chloe, you suggested you might wait till you're 30. Do you think that divorce rates would be lower if we waited longer?
Yes, I think that they would be. I think people would have more of a chance to discover themselves and really choose the person who is right for them, who meets their standards, who meets their needs. That is inevitably going to result in lower divorce rates if there aren't people who are 18 making silly decisions.
Arthur, I got married when I was 26. It's worked out well, but just in case, what's the best age to get remarried?
Well, you are quite right, 26 to 32. And that is what's stated in North American European literature, Mark. So you've got it right. Okay. So many people don't. But Chloe's right. I mean, it is, at that time we have accommodated, we're more secure in the establishment of our career. We have laid the basic foundations, and we are then in a better frame of mind to make and discriminate between what we want in terms of cultural expectations. By the way, Mark, I was just thinking as you introduced the program, I'm beginning to think this new legislation, is that inclusive of all ethnic minority groupings? Because I've had students when I taught in university, I had many students who told me stories of their sisters and brothers getting married at 13 and 15 and 14 in other countries. So I'm beginning to think now about the cultural aspects of that, of the legislation, whether or not our new legislation will incorporate all of those groupings or not.
Yeah, I tell you what, the mind boggles, doesn't it? My thanks to Dr. Arthur Cassidy, presenter and social media and celebrity psychologist and writer at Conservative Home, broadcaster and student and entrepreneur, it turns out, Chloe Dobbs. Your reaction, Mark at gbnews.uk. Very excited about my Mark Meets guest, who is the woman who was destined to become the boss of fashion giant Levi's before she gave it all up to take on the woke mob. Hear the incredible story of Jennifer Say after 10. We've got the papers at 10:30 with full panel reaction. But next, should benefits of truanting kids lose benefits? Should we rewrite that sentence, folks? Should parents who have truanting kids lose their benefits? And also, is illegal streaming of football as bad as organised crime? Lots to get through in our news agenda.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
A big response to my big opinion, which you can now see on Twitter at GB News. Samantha says, whatever the Tories did, whatever mess they made of it, why oh why is nobody mentioning that Keir Starmer and his ilk at Labour said COVID was a gift for the Labour Party because the Conservatives had to struggle their way through a pandemic of an unknown disease and not them. They could sit on the sideline and criticise. Well, I'd add to that, Samantha, that Labour wanted more lockdowns. So God forbid that Keir Starmer would have been in charge. Reacting to the big stories of the day, we have my all-star panel, broadcaster and journalist Mike Porky Parry, political and social commentator Lizzie Zita, and sports writer and broadcaster and someone that has torn out the summer wardrobe. It is Aidan McGee. We're going to spin through 3 news agenda topics right now. That's right, it's our big 3. And Michael Gove has suggested that parents who fail to ensure their children attend school could have their child benefit payments stopped. The Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities has argued that such penalties would restore an ethic of responsibility. Lizzie, what about that? Parents of truanting kids lose their benefits.
Look, it's a really difficult thing. It's nuanced, it's complex. Why are they truanting? Why you can't just take their
Lizzie,
benefit.
You've gone
hang on
woke.
a second. No,
it's not complicated. Get your kid dressed in their uniform, give them breakfast, send them to school, which we've been doing for decades, but we've forgotten now.
No, I don't think it's as easy as that. And I don't think that people like Michael Gove have ever been in a situation where they're extremely pressurised at home and they feel the spit on the road through their shoes because they can't afford a new pair. He is extremely well off, and I don't think that he understands the struggles that some people go through. On the other hand, kids need to be in school. They need to be in school. In particular, the girls need to be in school. I'm very pro girls getting an education. We don't know any of the demographics of these kids. Is it more girls that are not going? And we need to know more information. You can't just immediately take away their benefits when these families are struggling anyway. As a last resort, possibly, but not immediately. No, I don't agree.
Parry, we've always had grinding poverty, and yet families were always able to get their kids to school.
Poverty is relative, right? Poverty is relative. It's changed over the decades, OK? Now, I understand what Lizzie's saying, but if a child is suffering at home, that child would rather be at school. Do you see what I mean? Because school is a safe haven, isn't it, if they're having a bad time at home? So the minute a child doesn't turn up, then we've got to have a system where the school finds out why the child is not at school, right? Yeah. We've got to have a system like that. In Scandinavian countries, when a child's off school, they send their best friend round to their house rather than an official or something like that to try and detect what the problem is, because children will talk to other children rather than talk to adults. So we've got to have some kind of a system like that. But the point I'm making is, if, once again, we're not strict enough in this country in enforcing the discipline of our wonderful society. And once you let the rules of our society, which is the most civilised in the world, to drift away, anything could happen. So you've got to jump on it immediately, you know. Children have to be in school for so many reasons, obviously to learn, but also to acquire all the social skills they need to get on in life. And they don't do that by either A, being kept off or not going to school for reasons that they have not explained. We've got to find those reasons, OK? Internal truancy is a huge problem. Did you know this? That children in school don't actually go to their lessons, OK? Now, that's something that you can cope with in school, but you've got to extend that beyond the school gates and get back to the homes. And I support Michael Gove and say make it punishable for parents not to ensure they do everything they can to get their children to school, because if they don't, they're damaging their developing lives.
OK, well, amen to that. Now, police say that people who illegally stream channels like Sky TV are basically organised criminals. This is after concerns about the impact of illegal streaming online. Police raided homes in London, Stoke, Glasgow and Edinburgh to shut down a service allegedly selling these streaming devices. So, Aidan, are people who try and watch a 3 p.m. kickoff really comparable to Donnie Darko or Don Corleone?
Not quite, but the big companies have brought this on themselves. Unfortunately, I was quoted a renewal fee, I think last year, £195 a month for an all singing, all dancing Sky package.
£195 a month? I mean, a year would be a lot.
It would, yeah, and so...
That's about what I pay, actually.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that would include...
Does that include Babe Station, Mike?
Not to my knowledge, but I haven't sorted out
Babe
lately.
Station HD.
Yeah, he gets paid to be on that as well. Yeah. No, look, it's a byproduct of the commercial strategy of the big rights holders. I mean, apart from anything else, it costs £5.1 billion just for Sky to show Premier League matches, so the cost has to then be passed on to the customer. Now, I worked at Sky for 10 years. It was a real blow when we lost the Champions League to BT back in 2013. Now, the issue there was that we didn't miss it at first, but overall there was a cumulative effect of subscribers drifting away, and that really did affect the subscriber model. And so when you lessen and reduce... See, this is the problem with the EU, actually, from 2003. They pluralised the rights and made it illegal for one company to have all the rights portfolio, even though no one was actually unhappy with that. They were happy with the one-stop shop. Yeah. But what it meant was it diluted the packages, diluted the rights holders. It meant that people like you and I had to buy 2 or 3 different subscriptions when there was no call for it.
Wasn't it?
It was.
Outrageous.
But hang on a minute. The police are bashing on doors. You have to send an email when there's a crime in this country.
I know. Yeah, that's nonsensical as well.
You know, it's just crazy.
And I don't believe this is happening anywhere. I read about it in The Sun about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't believe it's happening. But when you reduce the quality of the service and increase the prices, people will inevitably seek different streams to watch their football.
But it is theft, isn't it? I mean,
it's piracy.
We criticise the police for not cracking down on crime. This is theft, and it's theft on a scale of millions and millions of pounds.
The 3 o'clock blackout doesn't help either, because irrespective of the rights portfolio and who owns what and who can show what, you can't show 3 o'clock kickoffs on a Saturday.
And people will do anything to see that 3 o'clock game.
They will. It was the
You can watch it in Sweden. You can watch it in Sweden on a Saturday. You can't watch it in England. Yeah, you can watch it in Ireland.
In Ireland, the Everton Supporters Club in Dublin.
What about the Isle of Wight?
No, not the Isle of Wight, no. Have the drop on me, because they can all watch it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I can't. But once again, it was the Europeans. You're so right, Ed. When you were at Sky, you only had to pay for your Sky subscription and you got all the matches.
Nobody was unhappy with that, Mark. Nobody
was unhappy. But then they said, oh, this is a monopoly. We better bring competition in. And what happens? Then you've got to pay for BT and Sky.
And Satanta came in initially, couldn't cope with it. ESPN
well, I got great news for you, which is GB News is free.
Exactly.
On the radio, if you're enjoying the show, if you're enjoying the channel, tell your friends, tell your family, and let's change the world together. Now, Mike, I've got 60 seconds on this. It's our third story in the Hot 3. A partially sighted pedestrian has been jailed for 3 years for the manslaughter of an elderly cyclist who was riding on the pavement. The court heard that Oriole Gray swore and gestured at 77-year-old Celia Ward as they passed each other on a shared path by a busy road. In Cambridgeshire, Mrs. Ward tragically fell off her bike and into the path of a car. She lost her life. Was it manslaughter?
No. this is a very tragic case. The lady on the bike was 77 years of age, OK? She was on a pavement. Now, the last time I remember looking at the way we run our society, pavements are actually for pedestrians, OK? I don't think this was a split route. You know, sometimes I live down on the south coast and there's bikes here, pedestrian there. I think it was just an 8-foot wide pavement.
It was a dual use. It was a dual
Yeah, but it wasn't marked on the floor. Do you see what I mean? It wasn't clear to the people who were walking.
It wasn't a cycle lane on the pavement.
It didn't look like a cycle lane on the pavement to me, the pictures I saw. Now, I've had plenty, I don't know about you two, but I've had plenty of problems with cyclists hurtling towards me on pavements.
And e-bikes and scooters.
And bikes and scooters.
I get scared of all those blokes in Lycra. I really do. I can't imagine you in I can't imagine you in Lycra.
I always stand out of the way because, for two reasons. A, I don't want to get hurt, and B, you know full well that there's likely to be an aggressive confrontation between you and the person on the bike, because the arrogance...
They always want to fight.
The arrogance of cyclists...
I agree.
The arrogance of cyclists saying, get out of my way.
They should have a reg plate.
There you go. All right.
Insurance is pointless.
Either way, a tragic story and very, very sad for the family of the lady involved. In my take at 10 is the civil service institutionally left-wing. We'll debate that in my take at 10, and I'm not pulling my punches. This after Sue Gray investigates the government over Partygate, then joins the Labour Party. You couldn't make it up. But next is woke policing making us less safe. We'll speak to the former head of Royal Protection, Di Davies. See you shortly.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Dear Mark, says Gillian, I love it when you have Mike on your panel and Aidan too. Best wishes, Gillian. Thank you so much for that. Plenty of love coming in for Lizzie Zeta as well. We do have the best political commentators on Mark Dolan tonight. Home Secretary Suella Braverman made a noteworthy speech at a counter-extremism conference this week, in which she said she was concerned political correctness had created a blind spot which allowed Islamic extremists to operate under the radar. Braverman said, there can be no place for political correctness in our national security. In fact, I'd like to banish it altogether. So is woke policing making us less safe? Here to discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Di Davies, former head of Royal Protection for the Metropolitan Police. Good evening, Di.
Hello, Mark. Nice to see you again.
Does Mrs. Braverman have a point? Is woke policing making us less safe?
Well, certainly, if you listen to the chairman's views, he made 34 recommendations. And probably the answer, yes. The problem is we have 43 chief constables and their minions in this country. Some of them undoubtedly are woke, and they are governed or held to account by 43 amateurs. And that's the problem. We have nobody really holding some of these chief constables and indeed the Metropolitan Police properly to account. And without a doubt, the Prevent programme, which is what she was talking about, has let the side down incredibly. And we've concentrated so much on so-called right wings, where with greatest respect, in my half a century of policing and being involved in security, the number of attacks by so-called right-wingers you could count on two hands, whereas the number of attacks by Islamic terrorists, you can go into many hundreds almost, or the plots are. And equally so, we have about 10,000 so-called Islamic supporters in this country, which we're not doing enough to target. So yes, she is right. What I'm sad about is 12 years on, Mike Reid, who was then Home Secretary, said that Home Office wasn't fit for purpose. Well, it's not fit for purpose because they're in charge of this Prevent, and they're far too woke by so many definitions, in my opinion.
Let's bring my panel into this conversation if we can, Di. I think there seem to be various aspects of wokery within the police force. You've got West Yorkshire Police grovelling to the Islamic community over a damaged copy of the Quran. Clearly, offence was caused, and that's regrettable. But you've got a teenage boy with autism who's receiving death threats. Well, a top cop from West Yorkshire Police doesn't condemn that. You've got coppers engaging with Extinction Rebellion and Insulate Britain, who have glued themselves to the M25, and the coppers are saying, would you like a cup of tea? Would you like a sandwich? What has happened to the culture of policing?
Well, sorry, are you referring that to me? I agree with you.
Yeah, let me ask you, Di.
I simply don't understand why we don't follow the principles as laid down in 1829. You know, our job, or the police's job, is to prevent crime and detect those who commit it. But they're aided and abetted, some of these woke chief constables and indeed commissioners in the Met, assistant commissioners particularly, who've come out with incredibly woke statements of late. They're aiding and abetting some of these nonsense by some of their comments. They're so petrified of upsetting people. You shouldn't be as a cop. You should be strong. You should obey the law, direct the law appropriately, but they're often laid down by the courts. And let's face it, if you were running an organisation now, the success rate of so many chief constables and commissioners in the Met, 1.5 people who are put before the courts, or the success rate is 1.5 of those who are accused of rape. Knife crimes, only 38% go to prison. I could go on and on with statistics. If you were running an organisation, as these chief constables and others in leadership positions are, you would be sacked tomorrow. Yet we put up with it as a nation. I'm filled with despair at what's going on at the moment, and nobody is showing any kind of leadership. There are exceptions, but they're very few. And even Mr. Cook, the new HMI, he can't tell chief constables what to do. He can make recommendations. So there needs to be a royal commission into the police in this country so we start getting things right. The public, you and I, are being let down.
And we're paying for this nonsense, Di. We're paying through our tax dollars, but we're paying through being victims of crime as well. Lizzie Zeta, I mean, this woke policing, it permeates so many aspects of civil society, including the grooming gangs.
Well, absolutely. I was listening to your report and I'm thinking about the young girls and the women that have been really badly let down. Look, when somebody breaks a law and seeks to harm somebody, they should be punished. It doesn't matter if they're black, white or blue or what they believe in, they should be punished. If you stop that, the whole of society starts to crumble. And that is what has happened in that fantastic report that GB News did in Rotherham. I mean, it was appalling what's happened there. Also, I read a father in Manchester is having the same problems, that his daughter is being abused. Why aren't the police going after these guys? It's appalling, and I think that this whole woke thing, people are getting really sick of it. I think it's over, really, apart from the shouting, because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up, and it doesn't have its feet in morality and good common sense. That's what I think, and especially when these things. I've got a young daughter. I'm very protective of her, and it horrifies me to think that the police aren't there to protect her.
It is a terrible thought. Di Davies, the big problem with the clock against us is public confidence must be at an all-time low.
Well, I tend to agree with you. Sad factor is there are so many good cops trying to do their job. In Rotherham, there was an excellent woman detective constable, but she wasn't listened to. That's the problem. We have somehow arrived in a state where we have those in command who don't realise that woke is wrong. They're not realising their job is to command and lead and obey and direct the law against those who break it. I simply don't understand why we tolerate such a low level of tackling criminality. And it's not middle classes, it's people in lower classes that normally get the targeted by these people.
If only Di Davies was leading Britain's policing. Thank you, Di. Next up is the civil service institutionally left-wing.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10 in just a moment, as top bureaucrat Sue Gray joins the Labour Party as their Chief of Staff, proof, if you needed it, that our civil service is far from impartial. My Mark Meets guest is the woman who was destined to become the boss of fashion giant Levi's before she gave it all up to take on the woke mob. Hear Jennifer Say's incredible story in just a few minutes. Plus tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp. But first, the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson believes he'll be vindicated by an MP's report, despite it finding breaches of coronavirus rules in Downing Street would have been obvious to him at the time. The Commons Privileges Committee, investigating his conduct during Partygate, believes the former Prime Minister may have misled Parliament at least 4 times. Mr Johnson said it was his belief all guidance had been followed and there's no evidence he knowingly or recklessly misled MPs.
The reason there's no evidence to show that I must have known or I must have believed that illegal events were taking place is because I didn't. And I thought we were fighting COVID to the best of our ability in very difficult circumstances in Number 10, in the Cabinet Office, night and day. And I believe that what we were doing was in conformity with the COVID regulation. So that is why I said what I said in Parliament.
Well, Mr Johnson also says he would have queried Sue Gray's independence before appointing her to investigate Partygate if he'd known she'd join Labour. The senior civil servant who's been appointed Sir Keir Starmer's new Chief of Staff found widespread rule breaking had taken place in government buildings. Mr Johnson was fined by police as a result. Labour say Mr Johnson's using the appointment to vindicate himself after being ousted over a series of scandals. Major ambulance strikes in England and Wales have been called off after what's been described as a huge shift in the government's position over pay. Tens of thousands of staff were scheduled to walk out on Monday and Wednesday next week. Unison and GMB say they've been assured there is additional money for pay rises outside the current budget. However, 3,000 members of Unite, the smallest ambulance union, will walk out on Monday after rejecting the offer of talks. Meanwhile, teachers in Scotland are set to suspend their planned strikes after an improved offer, which will amount to a pay rise of 14.6% over 28 months. Unions will now consult their members, but they've recommended members accept what the Scottish Government's called the largest pay packet in over 20 years. The disgraced American lawyer Alex Murdaugh has been sentenced to life in prison without parole for murdering his wife and son. The jury took less than 3 hours on Thursday before convicting Murdaugh of shooting his family on their family estate in South Carolina in 2021. Prosecutors argued successfully it was an attempt to distract from him stealing millions of dollars from clients to feed his drug habit. The US President Joe Biden's been given a clean bill of health after having surgery to remove cancer cells last month. The White House confirmed a lesion removed from his chest was a common form of skin cancer and no further treatment will be required. Mr Biden is expected to launch a bid for re-election in the coming weeks. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now, it's back to Mark.
My thanks to Aaron, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. My Mark Meets guest is the woman who was destined to become the boss of fashion giant Levi's before she gave it all up to take on the woke mob. Hear Jennifer Say's incredible story. That's coming up in just a few minutes. Plus, we've got tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction. Speaking of which, with me until 11, broadcaster and journalist Mike Porky Parry, political and social commentator Lizzie Zeta, and the face of sport and politics on GB News, broadcaster and writer Aidan McGee. Lots to get through. But first, my take at 10. The Sue Gray report is now a bit greyer than meets the eye. This experienced civil servant was seemingly the trusted neutral figure we needed to lead the investigation into so-called Partygate and unauthorised social activities within government during the pandemic. She's whiter than white, they said. She's squeaky clean, even-handed, non-partisan, more balanced than an elephant standing on a stool at the circus. Well, the elephant in the room is that Sue Gray has now signed up to the Labour cause. Hiding in plain sight, Gray, who has played key roles in several government departments, has shown her cards and joined the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, in becoming Labour's Chief of Staff. Surely this renders the Partygate investigation, which I've got a copy of here, completely null and void. Now, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has the opportunity to block this appointment, at least for a couple of years. But I don't think he should, because this is an own goal, not just by Gray, whose Partygate investigation is now less credible than a Nadeem Zahawi tax return, but it's an own goal by Starmer, who can no longer deny that the civil service is institutionally left-leaning. Yes, every human being has an opinion and a political view, but it's the civil service's job to serve the elected government of the day, whatever their political colour. And with her decision to head up Labour's war machine, Sue Gray has, in my view, brought the civil service into disrepute, or at the very least damaged its reputation for impartiality. Between now and the next election, this formerly neutral civil servant will be doing everything in her power to achieve a Labour government. Doesn't sound very impartial to me. And for the record, here is my copy of the Partygate investigation. It's a weighty tome, and it will be very useful next time I run out of loo roll. It's time to flush out our partisan civil service. I'll have to clean up that mess later. Now, let's get your views on this. Sue Gray would argue that leading an investigation into Partygate is a completely different role to running the Labour Party, and that her approach was in no way adulterated or compromised by her political leanings. And the civil service would argue that they employ thousands of people from all backgrounds. They've got a broad and diverse range of views, none of which colour the work they do. They would also point to civil servants who have gone on to work for the Tory party. But what do you think? Is the civil service institutionally left-wing? Does the Partygate investigation still have credibility? Mark at gbnews.uk. Well, it's already sparking a big response. Stuart has emailed, Mark, I've been in the civil service for nearly 40 years. Whilst individuals hold all sorts of political views, the wokery, gender identity and other idiotic diktats that come from the centre are definitely all left-wing. Steve, of course the civil service is left-wing. Do you think Ferguson, Whitty and Vallance are any different from Sue Gray? They're all communists. At least Susan Mitchie is honest about it. Time to clean house. Well, Steve, thank you for that. Keep those emails coming, especially if you'd like to speak up for our civil servants. Reacting to my take at 10, my all-star panel of broadcaster and journalist Mike Porky Parry, political commentator and author Lizzie Zeta, and sports broadcaster and presenter Aidan McGee. Aidan, what's your reaction to Sue Gray working for the Labour Party? I don't think it's a great look for the civil service.
No, it's not. But then I know of key Tories at the very top of the party who recruited their own people and employed them as civil servants. If we look at the civil service as a whole, I would reject any suggestion that it's actually left-wing. It's more left of centre. There is a subtle difference. If we consider the BBC, for example, as a comparison, they recruit from the same kind of metropolitan pool, and it's left of centre. It's more centrist, really, but it goes kind of left. But you know what? This has been perpetuated by party politics. That's caused this problem because, just like a Premier League football manager, I don't want to bring everything back to football, but when a minister goes into a department, the average tenure is probably, I would imagine, about 13 months. So there's no permanence there. There's no scope to actually affect any long and meaningful change. If we think back to the era of Yes Minister back in the 1990s, remember Jim Hacker, played by the late, great Paul Eddington. He was the head of the fictional... it was the Department of Administrative Affairs. He was in charge, but Humphrey next to him, he played along with him, but he just knew that he just had to ride out that period where Jim Hacker was in charge before they could get back to doing what they were going to do. Unless we have ministers that are going to be in control for 5-6 years to effect change, or probably less than that, because obviously we have to look at a parliamentary term, we're not going to see any difference. But I don't think the left-wing, they are left of centre. Subtle difference.
Mike Parry.
No, I don't agree with my very good colleague Aidan here. From the moment that Tony Blair got in, was that 97?
Yes.
Right, got in 97. He had the most able communicators working for him, Alistair Campbell and Peter Mandelson, OK? And I am absolutely certain, and I know Ali very well, I've known Alistair Campbell for 30 years, working in Fleet Street with him, that they started on an absolutely specific plan to make sure that the communicators in their government were going to communicate the message that they wanted to go out. That meant that the chief press officers in every department were going to sing from the same hymn sheet. That then permeated, in my view, right the way through the civil service.
But it's not. That's not left-wing, though. That's not left-wing. Left of centre.
No, it's not. It's not. It is left-wing because the Labour Party essentially are left-wing.
New Labour was centre-left.
New Labour was only a cover for Labour, if you see what I mean. It was just a cover they put on it, but it's now Labour. Now, where I think the Tories have gone so badly wrong is that when David Cameron got in 2010, head of the coalition government, right, he might say, well, I was a bit hamstrung, I couldn't, clear out the civil service.
You're talking of thousands of people, you can't do it overnight anyway.
Of course you are. But they've now had how many years since 2010? 13 years to start putting in the sort of people to represent their own message. They've only got themselves to blame. I believe the civil service is institutionally left-wing, and the people who join it come from universities, and they're young people who want to get into politics, right? And they start in the civil service.
New Labour's not much difference to the Conservative Party. They're social democratic. They think the same way. So they probably didn't want to change the civil service anyway.
We know academica in this country has been drifting left-wing for the last 25 years.
Longer.
Longer. Probably since the Second World War, right?
Since I was born.
And, that's right. And that means that those young people, they see a way into politics, can't be an MP, get into the civil service, and they've brought their left-wing leanings from university campuses into the civil service. It needs a root and branches reorganisation, but it's too late now.
OK, Lizzie Zito with the clock against us. This from David. Boris was stitched up by the civil service and investigated by the civil service, half of whom have joined the Labour Party now. Corrupt, says David. Your reaction, Lizzie?
Look, my reaction is this, that I read as much as I could over that Partygate probe, and I thought it was very, very measured. She did not go out to attack Boris. She was very methodical in her reporting, and I thought it was very, very fair, the way that she reported it. She did, but he is guilty. He was having loads of parties.
Yeah.
I mean, and he is guilty. It was a very, very stressful time. I personally think that we're reporting way too much on all these parties because I think there are bigger issues at stake. There are really much more. And I think that we should draw a line underneath it. Yes, he's a liar. He should not have done it because we were all locked down, etc., etc. But it's enough already. It's enough.
Well, look, I tell you what, a couple of very illuminating emails have come in. Fascinating what you said there, Lizzie. How about this for an idea, folks? From David, we should do as they do in America. The government of the day should pick the civil servants. They're left-wing. That is why the Tories cannot get anything done. Well, of course, that's before you even get to Brexit. Many think the Blob have been working against that.
Most people in the Tory party don't even want Brexit to happen.
Well, OK. Jeremy says, also worth noting that the Police and Crime Commissioner of Durham Police, who investigated Starmer and Rayner over Beergate, is a Labour candidate. No wonder he was so confident about getting off. Thanks for your emails. Keep them coming. Next up, looking forward to my Mark Meets guest, it's Jennifer Say, the woman who was destined to become the boss of fashion giant Levi's before she gave it all up to take on the woke mob. An incredible story. She's next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, handsome Alistair, let's do it. Problem with director Alistair spends too long looking in the mirror, but if I look like that, I would too. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight, and it's time for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport and beyond. Tonight, one of the most successful corporate executives of her generation. Jennifer Say, a former national athletics champion as well, who, as one of the senior figures at Levi's, was tipped to take over as CEO of one of the most famous clothing brands in the world. So what went wrong? Just a few innocent tweets early in the pandemic questioning the need for school closures. There followed a social media pylon and pressure from her employers not to comment further on the issue. Notwithstanding her huge talents and ambitions as a business leader, she was not willing to stay silent on the issue of the welfare of children, both as a mother and as a human being with empathy and a conscience. Astonishingly, although her objections to COVID measures were hardly controversial, this sorry drama ended in Jennifer's departure from the company. However, it has led to a best-selling book, Levi's Unbuttoned. The woke mob took my job, but gave me my voice. And having accumulated a massive social media following and considerable support for the stand she has taken, Jennifer has been far from silent ever since. And I'm delighted to say that she's going to be very noisy right now. Jennifer Say, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight.
Hi, Mark. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
It's a great privilege to have you on the show. Let's go back to early in the pandemic, Jennifer. You're one of the most senior people at Levi's, famous, of course, for their jeans and fashion wear. You were brand president. What was your terrible crime initially?
Well, at the very beginning, I was the chief marketing officer, and amidst all my contrarianism, I actually got promoted to brand president. You're right, which is next in line for CEO. So, that says something about my performance. But I was very outspoken from the very beginning, March 13th, 2020, in asking questions and challenging restrictions to children. Closed schools, closed playgrounds, masking of toddlers. We masked 2-year-olds in the United States, 2-year-olds. I mean, that's insane, right? I focused my advocacy on children because I thought that was a bridge that we could kind of find some common ground and that nobody would want to harm children. But boy, was I wrong. And, you say these views weren't controversial, but they were incredibly controversial. Where I lived in San Francisco, you had to embrace, stay home forever, lock yourself at home, lock your kids in their room. It wasn't dangerous, the isolation. If you dared mention learning loss, you were a horrible racist. And I persisted in being outspoken about it for 2 years. I led rallies. I was on local news. And eventually, I was cajoled to stop repeatedly for 2 years, and I refused. And eventually I was told there was no place for me at the company anymore. I was offered $1 million in severance to stay quiet and sign a non-disclosure agreement and walk away quietly, which I refused to do, because I wanted to be able to speak out on the censorship. Because without this kind of censorship, we would have had a societal conversation about the harms being done. If people like me who ask questions weren't demonized, we could have talked about this and come to a better answer. I mean, you guys came to a better answer. Schools weren't closed for close to 2 years in the UK. I mean, it was imperfect for sure, but the schools did open. And the U.S. lost their mind in blue states and cities. 18 months of school closures, a full 2.5 years of disrupted schooling for children.
And this did become left versus right. You were called right-wing, except that really you're a traditional liberal, as the Americans put it. You are historically a sort of Democrat supporter. You're a lefty, but somehow the left have left you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was a lefty. I wouldn't identify as such anymore. I would say I'm unaffiliated. I'm true to principle, not party. And, the way the American left operates right now, it's completely ideological. And if you don't support every aspect of the narrative, then you will be called evil and you will be called every single horrible name that makes you unemployable in the book, and you'll be banished. It's completely ideological. Truth has nothing to do with anything. And you have to uphold every single tenet of the platform, or you have to go. You're dangerous and you're evil and you're a racist.
Let's go through those different tenets. What do you make of the so-called woke movement, which I think it's fair to say comes from the progressive left? What do you think of gender ideology, which says a man is a woman, questions the basic facts of biological sex? What do you think of critical race theory, which effectively says you are racist if you're white?
Yeah, I mean, I could go through the list, one by one. Gender ideology, you have to believe in a lie, which is that there is no such thing as biological sex. There is. I won't further that lie. I am inclusive and I will not discriminate against trans people, but I will not further a lie. There is such a thing as biological sex. Body positivity is another woke movement. You have to further the lie that you can be healthy at any size and that food is neutral. There are no bad foods. There are only good foods. You cannot be healthy at any size. Obesity is a serious problem in the United States. That is part of the woke movement as well. And if you challenge that, you are called a fat phobe, which I was called for suggesting that the Centers for Disease Control should do a Get Healthy campaign, because the people that were suffering and having poor outcomes from COVID were very often people who were overweight. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I will not further a lie. You know, the lie of COVID was that everyone was at equal risk, that children were filthy vectors of disease, and that closed schools weren't harmful because kids were resilient. None of that was true. None of that was true.
You're a very strong person. You've had an amazing career as a national gymnastic champion and then a top corporate leader. You lost that. The woke mob went for you and you paid the price, which was your career, and I would imagine a huge financial price as well. Can you tell me what you've been through emotionally, Jennifer?
You know, that's really the hardest part, because my life is unrecognizable from what it was before. I worked at Levi's for 23 years. You know, this was not this was my life. My entire adult life had been spent there. I had friends for 2 decades. I've lost most of my friends because they take issue with my views and my outspokenness. There have been family ruptures that are not yet repaired, and I don't know that they will be. And I don't have a job, and I think I'm still considered a little bit too mouthy and dangerous for corporate America because I say what I think. And, you know, I speak in my own words. I don't wait for talking points to be given to me. And even though I've been proven correct on every count, the closed schools were incredibly harmful to children, and we're seeing the impacts of that now: mental health, learning loss. And of course, those harmed the most were the ones that I said would be, which were the low-income children, Black children, all of it. It doesn't matter that I was right, because it's scary to have somebody in your midst that is not going to follow instructions and is going to actually stand up and take a stand for what she believes in. They don't want that. And so, you know, it's uncertain what's next for me, and that's scary, but I'll be fine. I know I'll be fine.
Well, you're a hero to me, and I've got no doubt to many of my viewers and listeners for challenging the narrative, whether it's bonkers woke ideology or crazy COVID measures. I mentioned your life and your career, former national gymnastics champion, and then your glittering corporate career, then a best-selling book. I mean, everything you touch does turn to gold. It used to turn to denim, of course. Do you have any idea what you would like to do next? I mean, can you imagine returning to the corporate world or starting your own business? Or will you just stick with campaigning? What would you like to do?
Well, I'm not going to let this issue go. You know, so I won't sacrifice my voice to return to corporate America. I'll say that, because I want accountability. Incredible cruelty and harm was committed under the guise of sort of virtuousness, right? It was virtuous to lock people in their homes and isolate children. And it wasn't. It was evil and it was cruel. And people made these policies. Politicians, left Democratic politicians made these policies that harmed children, harmed low-income people. So I'm not going to stop talking about that, even though people tell me to. I am making a documentary film right now about the harms to children from the prolonged school closures. So that's where my energy and attention is right now.
And you will always have a platform here in the UK on GB News. Don't forget, Jennifer, this is a global show and a global channel. Many people are watching in the United States and North America on YouTube. And I do look forward to your return to the programme. Your book is out now. It's called Levi's Unbuttoned. The woke mob took my job but gave me my voice. And what a voice that is. My thanks to Jennifer Say. We've got the papers next, of course, with full panel reaction and some amazing headlines, including more from the WhatsApp messages drop and good old Matt Hancock. See you shortly.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss? Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. It's just gone 10:30, so it's time for this. Yes, we've got tomorrow's papers hot off the press, and we start with the I paper. They lead with the following. Boris Johnson come back in peril after damning texts from own staff. Series of WhatsApp messages from his advisers cast doubt on Johnson's version of events, and he's called to Parliament in 2 weeks to give evidence about his conduct. Senior Number 10 staff thought there was a great gaping hole in his denials about illegal lockdown parties as inquiry into misleading the House of Commons gathers pace. Former PM attacks surreal process and faces possible suspension from Parliament. The Daily Mail next. Boris, not a shred of evidence I misled MPs, and why Charles's coronation oil will be vegan. Of course it will. Daily Mirror next. MPs Johnson verdict. Parties he knew because he was there. Partygate rule breaking would have been obvious to Boris Johnson, a damning report said today. MPs probing whether the ex-PM lied to Parliament confirmed he did attend bashes as new snaps of him at lockdown drinks emerged. He faces a Commons quiz. Daily Telegraph. Hancock's battle with Sunak over COVID rules. Minister sought to enlist the Cabinet Secretary as he tried to force through tougher curbs on the public. Interesting story, that, proving my theory about Sunak, which is that he was a lockdown sceptic, and the lockdown files seem to be standing that story up. Also revealed lockdown lovers' frantic search for an excuse. This, of course, the romantic clinch between his partner Gina and himself, caught on CCTV in, I think it was the health department, in one of the corridors there, and they frantically searched for an excuse for their misbehaviour. The Times, MPs could punish Johnson. And the Queen Camilla, we'll have to get used to her new title, won't we? Joins Fiona Bruce at the Eden Project in Cornwall for a special episode of the Antiques Roadshow. The Guardian, Partygate, fresh evidence Johnson misled MPs. Also, medical students asked to step up in doctors' strike. And Guns N' Roses to headline the Glastonbury Festival alongside Sir Elton John. The Independent, the great gaping hole in Boris's Partygate defence. And the Daily Star. How about this? News that'll shock absolutely nobody. Pinocchio is a fibber. Rule breaking at number 10 during lockdown would have been obvious to ex-PM and he may have misled Parliament 4 times, say the Star, who are calling him Bozo Pinocchio Johnson. Those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from Mike Parry, Lizzie Zeta and Aidan McGee. And Aidan McGee, the halo has slipped for Boris Johnson. Do you think that any hopes of a political comeback are now dwindling?
He said in the week, didn't he, that he couldn't see himself being back in frontline politics anytime soon. But I don't know. I mean, he wins elections. You know, he was. You look back at the. It was a real achievement back in 2008, him winning the mayorship in London, because that's a Labour role, because London is a Labour city, and so he showed that he can win elections. He has that sort of Midas touch that not many politicians really have, actually. David Cameron couldn't quite get it. He was part of a coalition, wasn't he, of course? Yeah. Theresa May couldn't get over the line. Boris Johnson came in and won elections for the Conservative Party. So do I think he'll be back? Yeah, I think he'll be back in some form. Otherwise, he wouldn't be denying this so vociferously.
But do you think the public care about this right now, given the fact that my viewers and listeners are struggling to heat their homes, put petrol in their cars, get a GP appointment, keep their job, mortgage rates, the lot, you know? Why are the media establishment so obsessed with Boris Johnson and this blinking Partygate?
I have got no idea, but it bores me to death, to be quite honest with you. And I think another thing as well, that we're after 10 o'clock, aren't we? I can say rude things. Go for it. I think that Rishi Sunak should strap his balls on and say to Boris, butt out. Him and also Liz Truss. What are they doing? Strutting around on the world stage, going to the Ukraine. He's not a prime minister anymore. He was a liar. We got rid of him.
But that
tells me
he does want to return to the front.
Well, maybe he does want to return to the front line, but it's
and he's a liar, so of course he'd say he doesn't.
He's a liar. And also, he's amoral. Why doesn't he just go to America and write books and go on a talking tour?
Well, because he's got a huge ego.
And
he's got a massive ego.
But Lizzie, you're a Democrat. He received a 5-year mandate to run the country, and it was cruelly robbed off him.
Yeah,
no, it was not.
It was.
You can make that case.
He's still got an 80-seat majority. Look, I don't think he'll come back now. And I tell you why. I think Rishi Sunak has started to develop his own political credibility. Now, actually, I would much prefer Rishi Sunak to have solved the problem of people in little boats coming across the channel rather than the Northern Ireland Protocol, because nobody actually really cares about the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Well, the Irish do.
Yes, they do, but it's about 1% of all trade that takes part in this country.
But
yes,
I think the small boats are next, Mike.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that Rishi Sunak has now gathered such political momentum, has looked like a winner, has proved that he can push the big ones through, and that the boats will come next.
He'll probably come back to the civil service again,
but he's definitely picking up political momentum, and Boris now is just too much of a liability again. I mean, you can't have another Prime Minister between now and the next election, which is, 18 months away?
That's why I'm saying that Rishi should just say to him, look, bog off.
Well, I think he will.
Go away.
I think he will. And when you think about it, he said it to him last time. Last time, when he was the Chancellor...
Is Boris Johnson the sort to listen?
No, when he was the Chancellor, he said, Boris, I'm sorry, I'm not with you anymore, mate, I'm off. That was the end of Boris Johnson. So he's already got a track record of putting Boris in his place, and I think he can do it again. And I think because all this is blown up again now... I mean, look, Boris was on the television only a few hours ago saying, of course I didn't know there were parties going on. And I've got some sympathy for that, because at the time, if you read the detail, all these allegations happened when he got out of his official car, walked through the door at 10 Downing Street, and walked into a situation that was taking place. He didn't initiate. He didn't say to everybody, come to my office and have a glass of wine and a piece of cake. He didn't say to anybody, why don't we all have a celebration? It's Friday night. He literally walked into these situations. He should have walked straight out again, but he didn't because he said, you've all done very well. And that's why he's been done. I think a lot of it's been very unfair.
Alistair Campbell said after the 2015 election, and I remember him saying this clearly on the radio, he said there was a real lack of talent within politics. I think that situation is even worse now. And while that's in place, while that's the case, Boris Johnson will always have a chance of a comeback.
But the reason why there's a lack of talent in politics, who would go into politics?
They don't pay them enough.
Look at the way, A, they're not paid enough, B, they get absolutely ripped to pieces. All of them.
Social media especially.
Social media is appalling. It's a vicious, and it has this really big voice, and people pay too much attention to it.
Yeah, but people go into politics because they like power. And they like to have
most don't have power. Most don't have any power.
They have a chauffeur-driven car. They drive around. I'm the minister. I'm on television every day.
Ministers, maybe.
People. No, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
But not backbenchers.
But people want to be cabinet ministers and glorify themselves and all that. And a lot of people, particularly in this Tory government now, have actually made fortunes in business and then got into politics as a kind of afterthought. You see what I mean? Because it's something... I mean, Rishi Sunak's the perfect example, isn't he? He didn't need to go into politics.
No.
Sajid David and people like that didn't need to go into politics. Most of the cabinet, absolutely.
They're toffs.
They're not toffs. They're achievers.
They are wealthy and they are...
Hang on. Sajid David was the son of a bus driver. So he's not a toff, is he? He's a man who pulled himself up by his bootstraps and made something of himself.
And good luck to him.
Yeah.
But an awful lot of people at the top strata of our society have gone through Eton, they've gone through Oxford, they've gone through...
And that applies in the Labour Party.
And that applies in the Labour Party.
However, that's true of Boris Johnson, who was a very popular Conservative Prime Minister. Many people listening to and watching this show will see these headlines and they'll just think, there you go, it's the establishment media and the establishment politicians who effectively performed a coup on Boris Johnson.
Listen, he had his chance.
Yeah, they did,
He had his chance. He blew it.
He could be back.
Well, let's
He
hope
could be
not.
back,
Let's hope
Can
not.
we storyboard the circumstances by which he returns? Is there a cat's and hell chance of him coming back to fight the next election?
It would have to be then, really, because I can't see... If they're going to get the hiding that everyone predicts they will get, a la 1997, I don't think he's going to come back as an opposition leader.
He doesn't want to do 5 years.
No, and I also don't think there's any any vestige of talent that might remain after a major electoral defeat will not be around. Same as in 97, we saw immediately Portillo left the set, Howard left the set, all the Heseltine.
Some of them have already announced they're leaving the set.
Well, they're running already. Yeah.
Do you know what I think? I think his only chance now to rescue something out of his, political career is to be kingmaker. So he can now do deals to get behind people. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. But that won't give him anything like the gratification that he craves.
What's in it for him, Mike?
Yeah. Well, what's in it for him is that he does not want to be seen to be a malicious and punitive character because he needs about 10 or 15 million quid. Boris needs lots of money.
For all those kids.
Exactly. He's got
$1 million per kid.
He's got a very expensive lifestyle. And remember, his popularity is based on the buffoonery, right?
I don't...
And so if he stops being buffoonery...
You did that really well, by the way. You did it really well.
Thank you. If he stops being buffoonery and turns out to be a rather malicious and underhanded man who brought down other politicians, he won't have the same public appeal.
I could see a situation where, and I don't know Boris Johnson, but I would imagine that he wants to be back in power, but I think it's very possible he hasn't actually worked out what it is he's going to do.
Yeah. Interesting. So it could be events, dear boy, events that get him back into number 10. But when might that be? Would you like to see a return of Boris Johnson?
No.
Do you think he should come back and save the
I got
Tories?
fed up with him.
I don't think so, but what's your view, Mark, at gbnews.uk? After the break, we'll get Saturday's final front page, and it's The Express. More stories from the papers. Don't go anywhere.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Now, we've got tomorrow's papers, as always, between 10:30 and 11, and we've got the Express hot off the press. And let's have a look at what they're leading with. Well, there's only one story in town, and yes, it is the blonde bombshell himself, Boris Johnson. Boris blasts Partygate probe as cynical stitch-up. Also, Ken Bruce's gracious farewell. There you go. The great Ken Bruce has left the BBC, even though he has the most listened-to radio show in the country.
In the world.
And in the world. Reacting to the big stories of the day, broadcaster and journalist Mike Parry, political and social commentator Lizzie Zeta, and sports writer and broadcaster Aidan McGee. Now, let's talk about another story in the papers. The best and worst cruise lines of 2023 have just been revealed by Which? Magazine, with Noble Caledonia topping the charts. Viking Cruises and Saga were just behind, as 11 categories from cabin quality to port excursions were rated. But is a nice, relaxing cruise the best way to holiday in the stressful modern world? Is cruising the best way to take a break? What do we think? Lizzie, are you a cruiser?
No, I'm absolutely against them. I think I think they're really ungreen. They go to these tiny places, they all get off. Hundreds of thousands, loads of people get off. There's rubbish, there's all sorts of things.
They spread great wealth, you know. Spread great wealth around the world.
In Venice, they really campaigned against them. I've seen incredible footage of, like huge boats coming in. They all campaigned. I don't think, and also, personally, I cannot think of a worse way to spend time because I'd feel really cooped up. You can't get away from people.
Have you ever been on one?
They're enormous, aren't
they?
This is in your favour. So the only cruise I ever went on was on the QE2 over the Atlantic, OK? And, of course, being a celebrity media figure, I've got a great suite and all that. The problem is, when you go for dinner at night...
Everyone's bothering you.
Not that. You're sitting at a table and you suddenly realise after 5 minutes the other 5 people on the table in the silver restaurant are all crashing balls. But the problem is, you're going to be dining with them for the next 6 nights because you're trapped. You're trapped. And the QE2,
I'd be jumping overboard.
The QE2 wasn't a huge ship. It's only about half the size of the modern-day cruise liners.
I did a comedy set.
You couldn't get away from them.
Well, I did a comedy set on the biggest cruise liner in the world, which is the Harmony of the Seas, Royal Caribbean. I won't get sued because, let me tell you, it's a beautiful boat. The guests had a great time. But it's a pressure gig as a comedian because if you don't go well, you've got a week with these people.
That's right, absolutely. But at least that ship's big enough to hide away from them. You couldn't on the QE2.
I'd love to go on a cruise. I really would. But I never understood why they were never marketed to younger people. It always seemed when...
Well, they did, and then they became like booze cruises. You see what I mean?
I'm sure.
I think it's changing.
Yeah, I think it should be because I mean it seems like a good way to see the world. You get to go on. I mean, it's not as if you're
polluted.
You are cooped up. You are cooped up, but you also get allowed out, aren't you, for run out onto the main shore?
There's a huge practical problem with cruising, and I did have a great time on the Harmony of the Sea, but you have unlimited food.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And this is a problem, right? You're never hungry.
And drink. Unlimited food and drink, it's all free. Actually, I've just remembered, I went on another cruise on the Disney...
Don't go overboard.
on the Disney liner, and we went down to the Bahamas, OK, on the first ever Disney cruise liner with Mickey Mouse ears on the side of the funnels.
Oh, yeah, really?
You know?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right, because it was the first one, everything was free.
I've seen them disembarking here and there. I thought it looks fantastic, I have to say.
Yeah.
I think if you marketed them properly... It always seemed to me as if it was something for older people to do and they'd have to dress up on really chintzy clothing.
Well, that was like the QE2. They're all blue rinse American.
A man after my own heart. That's what I would think. What are people wearing? What do I have to wear?
What were you wearing, Mike?
I was also performed on a P&O ship, and they sang Land of Hope and Glory every night, which was very nice.
Fantastic. The P&O?
The flag and all the rest of it, and a couple of mates of mine didn't have such a good experience doing the comedy. It didn't go down that well with the crowd. And the next day, they would drown their sorrows. They were in the jacuzzi with a beer, and one of the other passengers came up to them and said, "Get out!" Right? Ordered them out of the jacuzzi as though you've got no right to be here.
You may know my mate Mike Osman.
Yes, I do.
And Mike Osman makes a living out of doing...
Throwing people out of jacuzzis.
No. Of entertaining folks on... well, he lives in Southampton, so he goes out to Southampton on all the cruise ships, you know, and you're absolutely right. If you upset somebody one night, you've got it then for the week.
You do indeed. Now, listen, let's have a look at our next story. After Rishi Sunak's wife was spotted in a pair of £570 suede slippers, psychologist Emma Kenny has revealed exactly what your slippers say about you. She says that backless slippers show you're unflappable, and the fashionable boot slipper indicates that you are a procrastinator. But this evening, I'd like to ask the panel what they think these slippers say about the individual brave enough to wear them. Take a look at these.
Yay!
Yes, folks, that is Aidan McGee, my wonderful panellist. Now, Aidan, first of all, I mean, it's an X-rated shot. There's a bit of Sharon Stone action going on there.
There is, yeah. It's part of a whole ensemble, so I wouldn't wear those slippers without the QPR.
Without the QPR, that one.
So they are QPR slippers?
They are official from the club shop and the dressing gown as well, with a mug and the programme. The whole outfit goes together.
And also a pair of QPR balls as well.
Can I just say, if my husband gifted me that, like a QPR, I would...
Aidan McGee in a dressing gown?
No, the dressing gown and the mug and all the rest of it.
Well,
it would be game over.
He's seen his feminine side there a bit, I think.
Do you think Aidan McGee's going to make slippers fashionable again? Is it time to make slippers great again?
Picture.
Listen, Lizzie, you've written on fashion stuff.
Loads. I used to be a fashion stylist, absolutely.
What do you think of slippers?
I think they keep your feet warm. There's nothing wrong with them.
They have to look good. Have you got to have nice ones?
You do have to have everything that you have. As William Morris said, you should never have anything in your house that you don't consider to be beautiful or useful. The same applies to fashion. It's really important. And
same in my house, except I live there.
Country...
Do you all own slippers? Do you all own slippers?
Yeah, I own more than slippers. I own guest slippers. Nobody gets across my front door with their shoes on. They leave the shoes outside. Nobody comes in shoes that have been walked on pavements
it's like
and all that.
It's like a mosque, isn't it, going into your house?
It is a bit like
and
that.
There's quite a lot of kneeling once you're in, I'm sure.
I have a similar rule, but
exactly.
no, I haven't got the overshoes thing going. But that's a good idea, Mike.
No, I
see what the QPR club shop I got next week.
I do. Andy Carroll, the footballer, right? He had 12 pairs of slippers lined up next to his door.
Well, I'm sorry, he's...
Did he wear them in matches?
He'd have done better if he had done, wouldn't he?
That's why he got so many injuries.
But no, the point is, he made the point that when you're paying something like, you know, £175 a square foot for your carpet, you don't want anybody to walk on it, do you?
No.
In their shoes. But I have that strict rule. No outside footwear has ever walked on my carpets anywhere in any of my homes.
Strict.
What's the best for a gentleman? What's the best look slipper-wise?
Well, I think you've nailed it there. I think that leather slippers are really nice.
Oh, good.
And a bit of embellishment
does your
on the
back in,
front
you know.
of them.
Does your back in?
Really rather wonderful.
Listen,
a little bit of a heel.
It does your back in if you wear slip-on slippers, because your body has to balance the fact that you've got to keep your feet in those slippers.
I'll tell you what, I'll take you shopping.
Yeah.
I'm a stylist, trust me.
OK, well, I wear moccasin slippers, right?
Very nice.
Because they're, you know, they look like you had moccasins on in that shop there.
Probably,
And,
sure.
But what I'm saying is you've got to be very, very careful. I also have lifts in the back of my slippers to balance my spine, OK?
Right. Yeah.
And it works perfectly.
Does it keep you upright when you've had too many Chardonnays as well?
No, because I'm normally sitting down when I've had too many Chardonnays.
So you're 6'5" when you're indoors, then, are you?
Yeah, that's right.
You know what, though, Mark? Oh, we're joking, but all this business about the way that things look, I think presentation is really, really important. Yeah. And I was really saddened to hear that Savile Row is struggling.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Home of the suit.
So sad, because of the pandemic, men aren't wearing suits, women aren't wearing suits.
My dry
Into the
cleaners
office.
has just closed down.
And it's really sad.
Yeah.
And I
Really?
think
Probably
that
because I give them a bad name.
Yeah, I would think so.
But no, they closed down because they used to do about 3 loads in their machine every day. Now they do 3 a week.
Yeah.
No, but the thing is, our politicians should be championing all of these tailors and wearing fantastic suits.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you on that one.
Savile-
You're all a good advert for Savile Row. Can we just do a quick line?
Savile Row came to an end when the Beatles left.
Well, now you're talking. Doing that great concert on the top of that building. Now, moving on to the kitchen item sweeping the nation. And Sun reporter Lucy Alderson says one way to slash energy bills is to cook everything in an air fryer. She proved her point by using the device to cook an English breakfast. Research shows households could save £260 a year swapping their ovens for air fryers. Do any of you have an air fryer?
No.
I don't, but you know what? I don't know what it would do for me, really, but a friend of mine swears by it. He uses it every single day. He's obsessed with it.
I've got producer George.
Christmas.
Producer George whips up miracles in his hairdryer.
What's a rubbish?
Hairdryer.
Was it air fryer?
Air fryer, not an air fryer, yeah.
It's a different device.
It'll last about 3 weeks. Do you all remember, I mean, you may not be old enough, but I am, when we all got a sandwich maker. Do you remember getting the sandwich maker?
No.
Yeah. And for a time, what you had to do is, you had to get this sandwich maker, you had to put 4 pieces of bread in it, put some beans in it, close it, and all of a sudden you had a baked beans sandwich. That lasted about 3 weeks.
Really, there was a fad. Do you remember you put butter on the outside?
Yes, that's right.
It was a palaver.
Butter on the outside so the bread didn't stick to it.
The teas made you used to get from Argos.
That was another
Has anyone
one.
ever had those?
Yeah, the teas made you wake up with a cup of tea. Those were the days. I replaced that with Mrs. Dolan. Oh dear, I'm in trouble now. Can I thank the brilliant Lizzie Zeta, Aidan McGee and Mike Parry. What a treat. Brilliant panel. And the emails confirm that. Most importantly, thank you for your company, listening. Perhaps you're working tonight, perhaps you're relaxing at home, or indeed watching the show. Enjoyed every minute. We'll do it all again tomorrow and Sunday. Don't forget, from 8, we've got the People's Hour tomorrow. And from 9, Big Opinion. Take at 10. My all-star panel and tomorrow's papers. So much to get through. Next up, the brilliant headliners. See you tomorrow at 8.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.